From haunted islands to cursed villages, we're exploring real-life horror stories behind these forbidden destinations. First up, let's travel to Mexico and the infamous Island of the Dolls, or Isla de las Muñecas. This small island is home to hundreds of decrepit dolls hanging from trees and scattered throughout the island since 1950. There is literally no electricity there or even running water. Concrete constructions are forbidden as well, and the only buildings and shops are actually made from wood. The story goes that the island's former caretaker, Don Julian Santana Barrera, found a doll in the canal and began to collect more, believing that they helped to ward off evil spirits. He claims to have discovered the floating body of a girl in the surrounding waters, and after finding the body, Barrera is said to have found a doll floating nearby, which he believed had belonged to her. To calm the girl's spirit, Barrera started hanging dolls from the trees on his island, believing this would actually provide her with some companionship. As time went on, he soon thought to himself that one doll hanging simply was not enough, and so for the next 50 years he would scrounge dolls from the trash and from the canals and hang them from the island's many trees and walls. Some of the dolls he would actually hang whole, others in various states of disrepair, so either, headless or feetless, legless, you get the point. Now, over time, as the legends spread, Barrera continued to collect even more discarded dolls from trash and traded goods in order to acquire more, leading to the island becoming densely populated with dolls. These actions don't really sound like the actions of a person who, has a good grip on reality, and that's why there's been so many doubts from people surrounding this legend. While the story is widely believed, some question whether the, drowned girl actually existed or if it was just a figment of Barrera's imagination. Even his own family didn't believe that he ever found a girl, although, they also didn't specify if they do think, what happened or not. So it's all very mysterious. Now, Don devoted his whole life to her, and the real horror begins when you learn that Barrera was actually found unalived on the island in 2001. Discovered, yep, you guessed it, drowned in the canal, in the exact same place he said he's seen the girl. Now, many believe that he was driven mad by the isolation and the eerie atmosphere of the island. In response to his passing, tourists actually began flocking to the island in order to pay their tribute at the time. Now, one person named Jose Perez, who is said to have visited the island all the way from Texas one year, stated that, it feels very calm there, but at night it would be pretty spooky. Just, all these dolls kind of hanging around looking right at you. Today, the island is completely off limits to visitors due to its remote location and the risk of disease from the stagnant water. And while yes, technically you can visit the island, if you try to, good luck though, because, most boat operators will refuse to actually take you there due to either superstition or their concerns about the spooky reputation the island holds. Next, we travel to the Bay of Bengal and North Sentinel Island, home to the Sentinelese people, an indigenous tribe that has lived on the island for thousands of years. The island is so isolated that the Indian government has put in place a 3-mile buffer zone to prevent outsiders from actually disturbing the tribe. But what makes North Sentinel Island so terrifying is the tribe's reputation for violence towards outsiders. In 2006, 2 fishermen accidentally drifted onto the island and were unalived by the tribe. They drifted onto the shore while they were illegally fishing in the area, making a chilling incident due to the tribe's extreme isolation and violent resistance to any outside contact. The Sentinelese are known to attack anyone who approaches their island, making it a highly dangerous and off-limits zone. Now, the 2 fishermen were likely poaching in the waters around the island when their boat drifted onto the shore, and upon reaching the beach, the Sentinelese attacked the fishermen, unaliving them. Now, due to the danger, authorities did not attempt to retrieve the bodies of the fishermen at all, and the Sentinelese have, actively resisted any contact with the outside world, making their hostility towards intruders seem almost primal. More recently, though, in 2018, an American missionary named John Allen Chow attempted to make contact with the tribe and was unalive, sparking widespread outrage and debate about the ethics of, contacting isolated tribes. John Allen Chow was going through his father's study when he found something curious and alluring, an illustrated edition of Robinson Crusoe, the classic story of a sailor shipwrecked on a deserted island. Now, in November of 2018, Chow, who was 26 at the time and he was an American adventure blogger and missionary, was unalived by the isolated tribe. He was attempting to convert to Christianity. When Chow's demise became international news, many Christians were keen to disclaim his actions. Chow's father actually believes the American missionary community is culpable, in his son's demise. He said John was an innocent person who lost his life, from an extreme vision of Christianity taken to its logical conclusion. He also told, news organizations that Chow had received 13 immunizations, though Survival International, an indigenous rights group, disputes that these would have prevented infection of the isolated Sentinelese people. Now, the Sentinelese, are considered one of the Earth's last uncontacted peoples. Their entire tribe is believed to number several dozen people, and in a brief message posted on Chow's Instagram account, his family pleaded for a more sympathetic understanding, of the person they called a beloved son, brother, uncle, and best friend, and someone who loved God, life, helping those in need, and had nothing but love for the Sentinelese people. On the night of November 14th, he and some fishermen, Christians who actually had agreed to help him set out in darkness for North Sentinel, carefully avoiding the Coast Guard vessels. They actually reached North Sentinel late at night and anchored nearby. The next morning on November 15th, he made his first approach. The fisherman refused to go any closer to the island, so he stripped to his underwear, thinking that would somehow make the Sentinelese more at ease, and he paddled a kayak towards the shore. He then saw a hut and some dugout canoes, and as he paddled up the beach, several Sentinelese people, faces painted yellow and speaking a language of high-pitched sounds, came rushing out at him. From his kayak, John was heard shouting, "My name is John, I love you, and Jesus loves you." But once he saw the islanders, stringing their bows, he panicked and threw some fish at them he had brought as a gift. Now, he turned away and paddled away, and he wrote that later in his diary, but obviously, you see, for me, that would have been more than enough to scare me off for good, but for John, no. He returned later that day and made another attempt, this time actually landing on the island. He laid out more gifts, then approached the hut, and then about a half a dozen Sentinelese emerged and began to shout. Instead of trying to leave, John did the unthinkable and walked closer to try and hear what they were saying. He tried to parrot their words back to them, which was actually met with some laughter, which made him think that they were tolerating his presence, but they weren't. Then, a boy actually fired an arrow at him, but believe it or not, the arrow actually struck his waterproof Bible, where he was holding it right to his chest. Now, the tribe had already taken his kayak, so he was actually forced to swim, almost a mile back to the fishing boat. But later that night, he wrote in his diary of just how scared he was. And so, he said, "You guys might think I'm crazy and all this, but I think it's worth it to declare Jesus to these people." He decided at that moment that he would make another attempt without the fishing vessel nearby. He thought, maybe appearing alone might make the tribe more comfortable, but also acknowledging that if the approach went badly, it would spare the fishermen from having to bear witness to his fatality. So please let it be known that John made it clear he didn't want to be unalived and thought that he would be more useful alive, but accepted the possibility. I don't know about you guys, but if my life was spared not once but twice, with the second time literally being saved by my Bible in my hands, I would have taken that as a very clear sign that God would not need to save me again, because that would have been enough for me to leave and never look back. But of course, for John, with his unwavering faith and optimism, he went out one more time, and that was the straw, that broke the camel's back. He never came back. The fishermen said that when they came back the following day, they saw an unalive person being buried at the shore with, the silhouette and the body and the clothing and circumstances. It obviously appeared to be the body of John. So tragic. But with all that to be said, I think you can understand why it's forbidden to go there. Now, to leave you with an honorable mention, let's travel to Italy and Poveglia Island, a small island located in the Venetian lagoon. Now, this island has a dark history, having been used as a quarantine station for plague victims in the 18th century. Thousands of people perished on the island, and their bodies were burned in mass graves. But what makes the island so terrifying is the reports of paranormal activity that have been documented over the years. Visitors have reported seeing ghostly, apparitions, hearing strange noises, even experiencing physical attacks by unforeseen forces. Now, some paranormal believers claim the island is the most haunted place in the world, so it is absolutely forbidden to visit for obvious reasons, of course.
Nestled in the very quiet town of Amityville, New York, this unassuming suburban residence has a bit of a dark and twisted history. In the winter of 1974, the Lutz family moved into this seemingly perfect Dutch colonial home, only to flee in terror just 28 days later. They claim to have been tormented by supernatural forces, unseen entities that left them sleepless, drained, and in constant fear for their lives. A year before the Lutz's arrival, the house had been the scene of a horrific mass killing spree. Ronald DeFeo Jr. had methodically killed his entire family in their sleep, claiming sinister voices compelled him to commit the heinous acts. Ed and Lorraine were called in to help with the horrors the Lutz family was experiencing, and during a question and answer session back in 2013, when Lorraine was asked what the scariest case was that she ever worked on, she said, "Amityville was horrible, honey. It was absolutely horrible." Apparently it followed her and Ed straight across the country, and she will never, ever go into the Amityville house ever again. And now that she's passed away, maybe you should follow her advice. As you might expect, this next story begins in the witching hour, the wee little hours of the morning. One night, very late at night, Ed and Lorraine were contacted by the Snedeker family, who had just moved into a house on Meriden Avenue in Southington. Specifically, the mother of the family unit and a niece who came to stay with the family were on the phone. What they found and bought was a big and seemingly welcoming home. But what they didn't know was that it was a former funeral home. Oh, and fun fact, the morticians at the funeral home were allegedly involved in intercourse-related acts with the corpses, and what used to be the showroom for the coffins was now where there were some young spirits living, which was just, down the hall from where you're hanging out, having brunch. The place where the bodies were prepared for the viewing. So the boys were the first to start talking about things they had seen and experienced, saying they were terrified, and at first the parents were like, "Come on, get over it," but the boys were so scared they started sleeping on the floor in the living room. Among the sounds the boys would hear were the sounds of chains pulling the coffins upstairs. Only thing was, there's no coffins anymore. So the woman who called the Warrens was terrified, and with the niece in a small bedroom in the back of the house, and apparently the covers on the bed were levitating at the time, like there was a fan blowing them around. Lorraine said that while the mother was on the phone with her, even more bizarre events started happening. The mother had rosary beads in her hands, and while she spoke, they were being pulled apart and falling to the floor. Thankfully, Ed and Lorraine went over the next morning with the family's priest. A blessing of the house didn't really do anything, and that's when the Warrens were like, "Hey, can we get a bishop involved?" The church did send an exorcist, which seemed to do the trick. But not before one last hurrah from whatever was believed to be haunting the house, because demons don't like to give up without a fight. There was this big tree in front of the house, and half of the tree, with no wind, broke off and fell on the property. The family moved a short time later. Ed and Lorraine kept the rosary beads because they were like, "Hey, if this demonic spirit can touch a Catholic relic, that means it's been infested with something awful," and they didn't want to risk the beads spreading throughout the world and causing more damage. In this next perplexing case, the Foster family found themselves entangled with quite the evil artifact, a conjuring book. And what did it do? It brought all sorts of awfulness into their home. As per usual, the eerie events began when Lorraine Warren received a mysterious call from a Mrs. Sandy Foster in the middle of the night. But the phone kept cutting out, and she couldn't call back. The next day, Lorraine visited the Fosters and learned about the disturbing occurrences in their house. Turns out, Meg, the daughter of the family, had invited dark spirits into the home by dabbling in the occult, and the family was suffering because of it. Faucets were turning on by themselves. People were hearing phantom footsteps echoing throughout the house. Strange lights were flickering off and on, and there was weird sounds plaguing every night. And Lorraine Warren stepped in to confront the menacing presence, and they discovered that Meg's bedroom was a hub of occult activities. There were conjuring candles, there was all sorts of occult paraphernalia, and ritual books. So they sealed the room, removed the sinister artifacts, and as they worked to dispel the evil, they encountered a chilling telepathic feeling of dread and an inexplicable force preventing them from going up the stairs. Despite these challenges, Ed and Lorraine persevered. With holy water and prayers, they successfully cleaned the house of the malevolent entities and never ever went back. Jack and Janet Smurl of West Pittston, Philadelphia, claimed that a demon was haunting their home from 1974 till 1989. According to the couple, the demon attacked them, dragged them across rooms, and even threw their dog at a wall. After investigating the home, Ed Warren later claimed that he spotted a dark mass in the home, and he heard a voice telling him to get out. Eventually, the Smurls turned to a series of priests and claimed that the demonic entity went away. Well, for the most part, after a lot of prayers and exorcisms. So there was a happily married couple in their 30s that bought this old inn in New England. So Nathan, he traveled during the week, but his wife Alexandria was home all the time to take care of their two daughters. Not long after moving in, Mrs. Carlson and her daughter began hearing footsteps on the second floor, where in the past, lodgers used to stay. During the afternoon and late into the night, they'd hear dragging, heavy booted footsteps moving all across the floor above them. Mrs. Carlson's older sister, who lived nearby, occasionally stayed overnight in the house, and she also confirmed hearing these footsteps. The Carlsons did have rooms set aside elsewhere in the house for live-in farm help, and these men would also hear these footsteps, walking in circles around their bed. Sometimes while Mrs. Carlson would be trying to sleep at night, she'd be awakened by the spirits in the home. They'd yank the covers off the bed while she was in it, and she later found out that the very same thing happened to the farm help, which accounted for why the men tended to quit so soon soon after they were hired. Eventually, the infestation phenomena upgraded into whisperings that could be heard behind closed doors. However, when Mrs. Carlson or her sister checked the room where the whisperings were coming from, there was never anybody present. Although these spirits projected words that were often audible enough to be heard, the woman could never identify the language that was being used. And as time went on, things only got worse. After the missus straightened up the house, knickknacks and other little items would never be quite where she left them. Outside the house late at night, lights would be seen in the attic, but there was no electricity up there. While painting a room one day, the heat was suddenly drawn away, and the missus felt a hand touch her shoulder. She got so angry, she threw the paintbrush in the direction where she believed the entity to be and said, "I don't know who you are or what you want, but you're not going to get me." Well, everything got worse. Things were happening pretty much daily because the infestation took hold over the house. The kitchen and the bathroom water faucets would suddenly turn themselves on, full force at the same time. On occasion, Mrs. Carlson would hear 3 knocks at the front door, which, folks, that's the sign of an inhuman presence. And of course, she'd go to the door, but there'd be nobody there. On the second floor, a visitor reported seeing a snake on the window ledge after hearing 3 taps on the window, but there was no nearby tree the reptile could have climbed. Oh, don't worry folks, it gets worse. So while living in the house, the Carlsons added a new addition to the family. And one night, while the missus was watching television in the living room, she heard this crazy powerful explosion, and when she jumped up to check, thinking that the furnace might have blown, she found the door to the new addition's room violently torn open. Objects were still swinging and vibrating, and the temperature in the nursery was similar to a meat locker. Though the spirits in the home had obviously tried to kill the new addition, thankfully the new addition survived. However, when the spawn got a little bit older, Mrs. Carlson was walking past him as he played with some knickknacks from the living room when he suddenly let out a loud shriek saying, "You stepped on Beatrice." Now, Mrs. Carlson put down everything she was carrying and she's like, "Who's Beatrice?" And he's like, "Oh, Beatrice is my friend who tells me what to do." Mrs. Carlson then told her son to ask Beatrice who she was, and after a pause he replied that Beatrice told him to tell her that she's a witch. The mom took away the items the boy was playing with, and it sent him into hysterics. She tossed them into a basket in her bedroom closet, somewhere the boy was forbidden to go without her permission, and didn't think about it until later that night, when she was in bed by herself and saw a large spooky form in the room with her. She described the entity as being darker than the darkest night, and it moved very slowly around the room, freezing her with fright. I didn't mean to be a poet, folks. Before the black mass went away, it transmuted into a globe of synthetic light, about the size of a basketball, while producing a deafening roar, which was once again similar to that furnace. And this went on for many nights, until the Warrens were called in. And like many other times, they took a tour of the home, blessed it, realized the knickknacks were tied to the entity, and took them with them.
Number 5. Aith Castle. Aith Castle is a hotbed of paranormal activity, standing tall on a hill overlooking the picturesque Scottish landscape. But don't be fooled by its stunning facade. This place has a dark and mysterious history that goes way back. One of the most famous ghostly residents is the Green Lady. Guys, what color do you think she wears? I'll give you 3 seconds, huh? What's that? That's right, green. She's known for her emerald attire and is often seen wandering the castle's halls and gardens. It's believed that she was a lover of one of the past lords of the castle, and when she passed, her spirit remained in the castle, forever searching aimlessly for her great lost love. Some visitors have reported feeling a sudden drop in temperature when she's around, and others have even claimed to catch a glimpse of her translucent green figure. Then there's the Grey Lady, who haunts the chapel. She's known to let out ear-splitting screams and often appears distressed. I mean, she's probably upset because people decided to name her such a boring name. I'd be upset too. The story behind her origin remains a mystery to all, but her apparitions have left more than a few visitors wildly unsettled. If you're into a bit of a mystery, which I'm assuming you are, you'll love the Hidden Chamber at Aith Castle. The Hidden Chamber is a secret room that was discovered behind a bookshelf, and it is supposedly home to some paranormal anomalies. People have reported hearing unnerving whispers and disembodied voices in there, and some have even seen shadowy figures lurking in the darkness, even when there's no one there. Reports of people witnessing knocking and tapping sounds that echo through the castle have also added to the castle's reputation. It's not uncommon for guests to hear these strange noises when no one else is around, almost following them throughout the structure. Some believe they're communication from the spirits that still reside within the castle's walls. Now, I'm not sure if it meant in the walls, like some type of H.H. Holmes kind of thing, but I don't know. I kind of feel like it is. If you're thinking about visiting Aith Castle, be prepared for the unexpected. Guests have reported sudden temperature drops, the feeling of being watched, and even seeing objects move on their own. Cameras and electronic devices also tend to be pretty much useless to capture these strange occurrences, as they tend to go haywire in the most haunted areas of the castle. If you're you're up for an eerie adventure, pack your bags and get ready to explore the hauntingly beautiful Aith Castle. Just be sure to bring your ghost hunting gear. You might just stumble upon something unexpected. Number 4. Fevy Castle. Fevy Castle is often described as a magnet for all things spooky and supernatural, chock full of some extremely goosebump-inducing occurrences. Fevy Castle is a grand and imposing structure located in Aberdeenshire, Scotland. It has grand turrets, towers, and beautiful gardens. It's truly a picture-perfect exterior, but of course, as we know, we can't let its picturesque appearance fool us. It's got a dark and mysterious side. Guests have reported all sorts of paranormal experiences, from unexplained shadows to the feeling of being watched. One of the most famous ghostly residents is the Grey Lady. Yes, another Grey Lady, different from the last. She's often spotted gliding through the castle's hallways wearing, you guessed it, a grey silk gown. The story behind her presence says that she was a bride-to-be who passed tragically and suddenly, right before her wedding day. Her presence comes with a sudden drop in temperature and a strange numb feeling throughout their veins. Then there's the spirit of a musician who's said to haunt the castle. His ghostly presence is often accompanied by the sound of a phantom fiddle. I'm naming him the Fiddle Lad. I'll go over with my cello and we can have a creative jam sesh. Fiddle Lad and V. I can see that going places. Now, if you're into the good old-fashioned apparitions, you'll love the story of the Weeping Stone. Legend has it that these stones, which were once part of a long-lost chapel, weep red metallic tears. People that have touched these stones experienced a series of misfortune and bad luck shortly after. If you're planning a visit to Fevy Castle, be prepared for the unexpected. It's not uncommon for visitors to hear mysterious footsteps or disembodied voices echoing through the grand hallways. Some have even seen objects move on their own, and there's always the ever-present sense of being in the company of unseen entities. Jedburgh Castle is located in the Scottish borders and has a rich history dating all the way back to the 12th century. But it's not just its historical significance that makes it so fascinating. It's the plethora of paranormal activities that has given this place its haunted reputation. The most famous of the ghostly residents is the spirit of Mary, Queen of Scots. This apparently legendary queen was held captive in the castle for all of 1566, and it's said that her spirit lingers to this day, very upset that she was left to perish in the dingy, musty halls of a basement dungeon. Visitors have reported seeing her figure, often in a mournful state, wandering through the castle's rooms and hallways. Some even claim to have felt her presence as though she is sending out a reminder of her tragic end. The castle is also home to the restless spirit of a phantom piper. Piper was sent to explore the underground tunnels beneath the castle, but mysteriously vanished without a trace. I'm not sure why they sent a piper to explore, but I believe that there is more to uncover here. A piper is not meant to explore. They're meant to add a soundtrack to explorers' journeys. His eerie bagpipe music is still heard echoing through the tunnels, as if he's still searching for a way out. Oh my gosh, Fiddle Lad, V, and the Phantom Piper. But that's not all. There have been numerous reports of unexplained footsteps, eerie voices, and even the sound of a horse and carriage passing by, when there are no horses or carriages. The paranormal activity at Jedburgh Castle isn't confined to just one area. It's a full-fledged supernatural extravaganza. From shadowy figures lurking in the corners to inexplicable cold spots, it's a place where the line between the living and the dead becomes blurred. If you're planning a visit to Jedburgh Castle, be prepared for the unexpected. Guests have often reported doors slamming shut on their own, objects moving mysteriously, and electronic devices acting up in the presence of the castle's spirits. Number 2. The Toll Booth. Nestled in the charming town of Forest in Scotland, the toll booth is an excitingly terrifying place where history meets the supernatural. The 19th century building and its grand architecture have a dark side, making it a magnet for ghostly tales and paranormal activities that are sure to leave any visitors in awe and fear. The toll booth was originally a courthouse and jail, which in and of itself is creepy enough, but since its opening there have also been a myriad of ghostly stories, earning it a reputation reputation as one of the most haunted places in Scotland. One of the apparitions that roam the shadowy halls is the spirit of Hector Munro, a local man who met a tragic end in the 18th century. Hector's presence is often felt in the form of strange, unexplained sounds, an eerie touch, or an icy sensation when entering his former cell. If you're going into his cell and then you're freaked out when something scary happens, that's on you. Don't act surprised, you wanted this to happen. Hector's spirit is just one of the many restless souls that call a toll booth home. The building has more than its share of reports. Mysterious footsteps echoing in empty corridors, unexplained knocking sounds, and objects that seem to move of their own accord. It's as if the past continues to play out its ghostly drama in the present. Last suggestion, a mockumentary about the ghosts in here, like What We Do in the Shadows, but ghosts. But unfortunately, I'm not sure how possible my dream is. It's not uncommon for devices to malfunction or pick up bizarre readings when inside the building. Beneath the structure lies the basement, aptly named the Pit. It was a place of immense suffering for prisoners who were kept in extremely inhumane conditions. The energy of their torment still lingers in the heavy air, and some courageous souls, or audacious souls if you ask me, who venture into the darkness have reported feelings of intense unease, sudden drops in temperature, and strange disembodied sounds originating from the depths of the musty basement. Visitors have described an eerie sensation of being watched and an inexplicable feeling of dread that can wash over them suddenly. The fairy tree is a centuries-old oak tree located in the region of Doris, Scotland, and it is shrouded in both history and supernatural tales. This historical landmark is not only a cherished ancient living relic, but a place that holds hundreds of ghostly tales and legends that have excited and terrified visitors and locals for generations. The history of the fairy tree is deeply rooted in Scottish folklore and traditions. The tree has been long associated with the supernatural, as it used to serve as the focal point for various rituals and ceremonies, often linked to the mystical realm of the fairies. But it's not just the fairies that contribute to the mystique surrounding the tree. The gnarled and ancient oak, with its twisted branches and distinctive appearance, has become a symbol of mystery and awe. Its unique form has secured it a reputation as a sacred place, with some believing it to be a site of ancient druidic rituals. What adds to the mystique is the reported paranormal activity in the vicinity of the fairy tree. Some visitors have claimed to hear otherworldly music, akin to the ethereal tunes of a fairy's harp. Yes! My band is complete. The Fiddle Lad, the Phantom Piper, and the Wrathful Fairies. The fairies' music is frequently heard emanating from the area, even in the absence of any visible musicians. These occurrences, along with strange, unexplained lights and mysterious whispers, have led many to believe that the tree is a site of ongoing supernatural activity. While the fairy tree itself is not known to be inhabited by spirits, the surrounding area has its own tales of ghostly apparitions and strange occurrences. It's said that the spirits of those who were wronged in the past continue to haunt the nearby shores, seeking justice or resolution. These legends have been passed down through generations, and local lore often mentions witnesses' encounters with these restless souls.
How about we start off today with none other than the door to hell, over in Turkmenistan. Well, Joss Whedon led us to believe that the entrance to hell could be found in Sunnydale, California. He was actually around 7,500 miles off. What can I say? I'm a big Buffy fan. Located in the middle of the Karakum Desert in Turkmenistan is the Door to Hell, a name locals gave to a 230-foot wide crater that simply won't stop burning. Another nearby gas crater is fenced off and smells of natural gas, or should I say reeks. Now, the early years of the crater's history are kinda uncertain. Relevant records are either absent from the archives, classified, or inaccessible, which that's a little spooky. Some local geologists have claimed that the collapse into a crater happened in the 1960s, and it was set on fire only in the 1980s to prevent emissions of poisonous gases. Yikes. Others assert that the site was drilled by Soviet engineers in 1971 as an oil field, but collapsed within days, forming the crater, with the engineers choosing to flare the crater to prevent emissions of poisonous gases, but underestimating the volume of said gas. When Soviet scientists began searching for oil back in 1971, they just accidentally hit a methane reserve, and the drilling platform collapsed, thus forming said crater and releasing all those bad gases into the air. The scientists were like, let's light this on fire to try and burn off the methane, creating a Dante-esque anomaly that has remained lit for the past 50 plus years. In April of 2010, President Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedow recommended that measures be taken to limit the crater's influence on the development development of other natural gas fields in the area. In January of 2022, the president announced plans to extinguish the crater, citing harmful effects on local health, the environment, and the natural gas industry. A commission was established to find the optimum technique, but despite the president's intentions, the crater remains open and burning. Just last year, the American and Turkmen governments discussed ways in which they could cooperate to permanently seal this thing. Now, that would require two things: putting out the fire and then stopping the gas from seeping out of the earth. The first step is considerably easier than the second. One could, for example, spray quick-dry cement into the crater, removing the oxygen-rich air that fuels the fires, but then the methane's gonna find other routes to the surface, adding another leaking methane source to the country's woeful tally. That means the only way to properly suffocate the gate to hell is by smothering the leak at its methane source. And short of a massive nuclear device, nobody knows how to do that. And trust me, you don't want another nuclear device in this atmosphere. So while we might not consider this evil by any demonic means, in terms of the environment, it had to top my list today. Next up, we have another tourist destination you might not want to visit: the Gomantong Caves in Malaysia. For starters, I know the government of Canada is already advising against visiting this country as a whole because of a high risk of criminality and specific crimes I can't mention on the internet. But these caves are pure geographical wonders, with limestone walls reaching up to 300 feet in some spots. But visitors often leave the site describing it as one of the most disgusting wildlife experiences they've ever had. Oh, you want to know why? Well, that's what I'm here for. First things first, Gomantong is home to more than 2 million bats, which leads to an impossibly thick layer of guano, otherwise known as bat poop, covering the ground. And don't even think about slipping because the handrails are apparently just as filthy as the floor. And hey, if that hasn't spooked or disgusted you enough yet, don't worry, I'm not done. If you can make it through the river of bat droppings, or the deluge, you'll then encounter several million Malaysian cockroaches just scurrying around. Ooh. I know, personally speaking, the thought of visiting anywhere with cockroaches, or like that many cockroaches, is gonna send me running for the hills faster than you can say follow the yellow brick road, so no. Absolutely not. Wherever the bat dung is, that's where the cockroaches will be, which essentially means everywhere, and that's everywhere I'm not gonna be. Finally, if you get past the bat smells, the cockroaches crawling up your legs, there are several other wonderful creatures you might just happen upon. Oh, what are they? Oh, my worst nightmares. Otherwise known as snakes, scorpions, freshwater crabs, and the infamous giant Scutigera centipedes, which are poisonous critters that are at least 3 inches long. How this place is considered a tourist attraction and not a death trap is beyond me, because it sounds like somewhere that should be just burnt. I don't do well with bugs, and the fact that there are venomous and poisonous creatures there? Absolutely not. Here's another doozy: the Beelitz Hospital in Germany. So it might not be a bug fest, or a burning pit of hell, but allow me to tell you why this place that's creepy beyond means should be avoided. Between 1898 and 1930, the complex that's roughly a 15-minute drive south of Berlin served as a tuberculosis sanatorium, which... oof. A 600-bed complex equipped with the latest technologies allowed patients to revel in the country air and undergo the primitive surgery that was standard in the pre-antibiotic age. The patient pavilion, which included terraced balconies used for air bath treatments, was divided into 4 quadrants. The women and men were housed on the west and east ends, respectively, while the north-south axis divided the contagious quarantine patients from the others. I almost feel like this goes without saying, but any buildings that used to host sanatoriums or mental institutions of any kind are almost guaranteed to have a heavy ghost presence. There was a lot of bad things that I can't talk about in detail that kinda happened in those places. It also housed mustard gas and machine weapon victims during the First World Yikes event, including a young soldier who went on to become the evil German dictator whose name I can't say, who had been wounded in the leg. The hospital later went on to become a major treatment center for Yahtzee soldiers during the Big Bad Event number 2, and it was used as a Soviet military hospital from 1945 until the fall of the Berlin Wall. In the chaotic interim between the fall of the wall and German reunification, a serial killer known as the Beast of Beelitz began to terrorize local women connected to the sanatorium, using specifically pink lingerie to rope necklace them to death or gag them, and then laying the garment across their corpses. Later identified as Wolfgang Schmidt, he was eventually apprehended and sentenced to 15 years in detention in a psychiatric ward. In recent history, specifically in 2008, photographer and sadist Michael K. brought young model Anja P. to the site for a photo shoot in its abandoned operating theater. He then lured her to a small apartment available on the edge of campus, slugged her to death with a frying pan, and had intercourse with her corpse. I didn't mean for that to rhyme. Today, a few hospital wards are used as neurological rehabilitation rehabilitation centers, although the majority of the complex is abandoned. The surgery and psychiatric wards have both been left to decay and give way to nature and vandals, and the result looks like something straight out of American Horror Story, which is not exactly an enjoyable day trip for the easily spooked. I can sort of just sense the evil seeping out of there, so no thank you. So before I start getting jittery, let's go back over to the States, specifically Centralia, Pennsylvania. A lot of rhyming today. From the late 1800s to the 1960s, Centralia was a quaint but bustling town in Pennsylvania, thanks to its prosperous coal mines. Mining town, shoulda known. However, when a mine mysteriously caught fire in 1962, the flames began to spread underground via the interconnecting tunnels. Although the citizens were aware of the situation, they weren't truly troubled until two isolated incidents some years later. A gas station owner reporting abnormally high gasoline temperatures in his underground tanks in 1979, and a youngin' nearly falling into a 150-foot deep sinkhole in his backyard in 1981. After those really weird occurrences, the town's population plummeted. Burning for over 50 years, Centralia, Pennsylvania's mine fire certainly seems like the fiery lair of dastardly demons and spirits. And what's more, the fire heats the groundwater to boiling temperatures, causing steam to just randomly rise from the ground. On certain days, this gives this town's landscape an unsettling, misty appearance. Speaking of that landscape, the mine fire burning under the town has left large patches of ground devoid of trees and life. Because the fire heats the surface to such a high temperature, tree roots die and the vegetation withers away, and these areas are particularly visible in the burn zone, which is near the southwest edge of the town. With only a few buildings remaining, this town is clearly an abandoned place. Most of the residents said "see ya" a long time ago, leaving only trace signs of their lives there. As of 2021, only 4 residents remain, although it seems like a complete ghost town if you were to try and visit. Also, it has more people buried there than it has living there, which, if you're gonna drive around, you're gonna see 3 cemeteries: St. Ignatius, Saints Peter and Paul Orthodox, and Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Hey, if you ever find yourself in the deserted city, you're gonna find a lot of torn down buildings, crumbled sidewalks, and the cracked, graffiti-filled Route 61. And just in case you forgot why the town is deserted, you can occasionally just see smoke billowing out from the subterranean fires, which scientists estimate will continue to burn for another 250 years. No biggie. Alrighty, how about I end today with an abandoned island, specifically the island of Poveglia. So this island is located in the lagoon near Venice and is famous for being one of the most haunted places in all of Italy. Tourists and locals alike are banned from going here because it was used for centuries as a place to exile the sick, to prevent the spread of disease and contain the mentally ill in an asylum built in the late 1800s. So in 1348, the bubonic plague arrived in Venice, and Poveglia, like many other small lands at the time, became a quarantine colony. This plague on average killed 1 out of 3 Europeans, and fearing the unbridled spread of the disease, Venice was like, okay, if you're showing any symptoms, here you go, out you get, not here. At the island's center, the dead and those too sick to protest were kind of burnt on giant pyres, and this included the tens of thousands of citizens dying on the mainland. Now these fires would burn once more in 1630 when the Black Death came sweeping through. The small island was used as a mass burial ground, and ashes from human remains make up as much as 50% of the island's soil, so I hope it's a good fertilizer. The deaths of nearly 160,000 people on the island have given it its nickname, the Island of Ghosts. A doctor at the asylum was known to have experimented, by the way, on the patients there with lobotomies, and he jumped from the bell tower in the 1930s after claiming he had been driven mad by ghosts. I wonder why. Decades later, nearby residents still claim to hear the bell, even though it was removed many years earlier. A report titled Haunted History states that some restoration work had started, but stopped without any explanation. Okay, maybe I don't want to visit there. Oh, you want to know? Okay. Cattle mutilations, mysterious lights and shapes in the sky, wolf-like creatures disappearing into the night, mysterious equipment failures, unknown illnesses, crop circles, disembodied voices, and more. Now this 500 acres of isolated land is located between Ballard and Vernal, and the Sherman family acquired the ranch in the 1990s, but old myths of S-walkers, and which are witches with the ability to shapeshift into various animals, have haunted the region for centuries. Now, before the Sherman family inhabited the ranch, the spot was known as UFO Alley, and the news reported in 1978 that nearby residents had spotted a dome-shaped UFO over the ranch that was surrounded by a glowing green light. And the supernatural activity did not end when a family moved in. They reported doorways of light vanishing in midair, cattle that went poof, animals mutilated, crop circles. I know I'm repeating myself, folks, but it's bonkers. Also, invisible objects emitting destructive magnetic fields? Where the heck does that come from? Now, while investigating the disappearance of cattle, one man reportedly saw a large beast, like a wolf, but much bigger, harassing other cattle. Now, he was like, okay, I got a little firearm, let's get kapow. So the target landed, but the creature didn't slow down, seemed unscathed, and I'm gonna tell you right now, animals don't do that. So yes, you might be asking, okay Alexa, but what about disappearing nowadays? We're not cattle, we're human. Well, Well, there's also the infamous hitchhiker effect, where visitors feel the effects of the ranch long after they've left. And whether it takes the form of strange phenomena or just an unshakable eeriness, the ranch seems to have some serious staying power. Theories range: ancient curses, geological forces, and good old-fashioned alien activity. The jury's still out and might never deliver a verdict, but one thing's for sure, trips to the ranch will lead to some serious spooking. Outsiders are not currently allowed on the property, but don't worry, there are plenty of neighbors in the area that have reported their fair share of strangeness. I wouldn't recommend trying to sneak onto the property, because folks who do don't really come back from it. Every ghost town is a safe bet to give you the spooks, and Utah sure has a lot of them, but I think Winter Quarters has an eerier past than others, one that might still be reverberating to the present. In 1900, now this place is located just out of Schofield Reservoir State Park, and it was a bustling mining town. Then disaster struck when an explosion in the mine, which was supposedly the safest in the state, resulted in the deaths of 225 men. And at the time, yeah, it was the worst mining disaster ever in the States. It's hard for anybody to go back to work after that, but these guys had more problems than most. Number one, well, we've got the ghost of a headless miner just wandering around, hanging out. The guys that were working in the mine saw that and were like, yeah, I'm not working one more second in here unless this thing gets out of here. So the existence of the ghost, well, it kind of blew up, and it was soon identified as the spirit of Sandy McGovern, a miner whose body was the last to be taken out of the fatal pit after the explosion. So everybody was like, okay, where's the body? Let's put this to end. You wanna know how bad this got? Almost 50 men quit because of the ghost. 500 miners went on strike. What else? Oh, that's not the end of it, folks. Mysterious blue lights in the cemetery, strange noises in the depths. Now the mine has long since closed, but remnants of the town still stand, and mining technology sure has advanced a lot since then, but the ghosts are resurfacing. Look folks, I grew up in a gold mining town, and if I know anything about hanging around abandoned mines, you're risking your life. I wouldn't recommend it. You don't want to go poof. The Great Saltaire is an old music venue that is reported to be haunted by a couple of very hostile ghosts. Even Ghost Adventures visited there in 2021 to film The Great Saltaire Curse. The show claims the building and land around the resort is plagued by hostile paranormal energy, including the haunting presence of Saltaire Sally, a woman found dead on the property who seems to be pretty violent and causes physical pain to visitors. People also report hearing voices and seeing a lot of other ghostly unknowns roaming about. An employee says that usually between 1 or 2 bodies per year are found in like the general area. So sure, maybe not going poof, but life going poof? And sure, the original resort thrived on that land for 32 years, at least until the first fire in 1925, but nowadays not so much. Guests are literally told, nothing seems to thrive here. So when the TV show visited the area, one of the crew members went off on his own to investigate the edge of the lake, and as he was setting up his equipment, he heard this crazy loud splash, where the largest living creature is like a little tiny shrimp. So it freaked him out, because he's like, there's nothing out there. Now, it's hard to describe what he saw, but he saw something in that water, and it was terrifying. Relics of the age of the Great Salt Lake resorts are nearby and can be seen from the highway. And until most recently, the most notable of these was the skeleton of a car 502, which is one of Salt Lake's interurban rail cars that sat beside the ruins of an old powerhouse, which once fed lights and roller coasters at the entrance to the original fair. The rail car was removed in 2012 by the property owner because, well, safety concerns. People kept getting hurt and going missing. Rows of pilings snake outwards towards the lake, all that remains of the railway trestle and the pier that once led to the resort. The surviving buildings of Lake Park, one of the neighbors, were moved to a new site 30 miles away, where the Lagoon Amusement Park has grown around them. Now, the Salt Lake, Garfield, and Western still exists as a common carrier shortline railroad, providing switching service in this area. However, the tracks no longer reach the resort itself, and I'd recommend against exploring. In 2022, the Kingston Group was on the receiving end of a lawsuit from former members that alleged years of unpaid labor, people outsourcing, and icky non-consensual intercourse stuff. If I sound like a Looney Tune, there's things I can't say. The Sex X members claim that it's largely through illegal marriage practices that the group is able to unlawfully make girls and their offspring religious martyrs and outsource them for intercourse and labor purposes, and overall make them disappear. None of the plaintiffs claim that the Kingston Group made them begin working during their early school days, through their pre-college years, and never received a paycheck. One complainant, Amanda Ray Grant, claims she was assigned to work in her high school years at Advanced Copy, where wedding announcements and invitations were printed because wedding pictures of, well, icky marriages or plural marriages, well, you can't get those printed at Walmart. Well, the Kingston Group, which was founded in 1935, is not affiliated with the infamous FLDS. Members practice a fundamentalist version of Mormonism that involves multiple marriages. Members are primarily born into the organization, and they have a leader, Paul Eldon Kingston, known as the Man in the Watchtower. But you can also get recruited in, or just stolen. The lawsuit explains how the birth certificates of multiple plaintiffs failed to list their biological fathers, so those men could escape the legal consequences inherent to having multiple, often too young, wives. And two of the plaintiffs share the same father, Jesse Orville Kingston. The suit alleges Kingston family members try to preserve their lineage purity by marrying and procreating with other Kingstons. Now, Jesse is not listed on either birth certificate, according to the lawsuit, which additionally accuses him of fathering more than 300 offspring with 14 wives. The Kingston Group argued that it is the parents' prerogative to file birth records for their spawn how they choose within the bounds of the law, saying in the statement that it's especially true of a mother who has the legal right to establish paternity or not at the time of filing. Now, the statement said, "We don't have any specific guidance for members pertaining to birth certificates, medical records, but we tell everybody to follow the law." Yeah, I'm Colin Bull. Anybody else? And finally for today, ever hear about the creatures of Utah Lake? Allegedly around 14 feet deep, the lake has been home to many a mysterious drowning or disappearance over the years, with numerous planes and boats rumored to be littering its depths. The creature of Utah's Bear Lake is the most well-known of the local unknown water cryptids. The local surrounding Native American tribes, Shoshone, Ute, and Bannock, were the first to speak about this creature. It was described as a giant serpent or dragon-like beast that would capture and carry away any and all that dare swim in the lake. So, disappearing. For example, in the early 1860s, Mormon settlers began to see these creatures. Somebody claimed to have seen something akin to a downed carcass just floating in the water. It had cluster-like ears the size of teacups, and it could spurt geysers of water from its nose. Now he's like, okay, this thing's gotta be so big, because it didn't drift to the shore, so its legs must have been embedded in the muddy-like bottom of the lake. Most of the sightings of this creature describe it as a kind of dragon or freakish alligator-like beast. In the year 2000, James Chase noticed something strange swimming in the lake near Pelican Point, and it was around 40 yards from where he was. He was like, this is something, it was a little bit larger than a barrel drum in width, and it surfaced like a whale and then submerged again. Apparently it was shimmering silver in color with large yellow stripes running vertically along its midsection. Now, James was a Hawaiian transplant, and he's seen a lot of different things in the ocean, but nothing like this. Also, there's a couple of other things. There's water babies. Look, I can't say the name. Apparently there's something to fear. They're kind of known as water kelpies, merfolk. And the local ones, well, they're a fairy water species, which is not good. Fairies are things that can be dangerous if you disregard or disrespect. So, turns out when you're walking by the shore, you hear distant crying. Sounds pretty young? Yeah, that's what you hear. So don't approach them or else you're going to disappear. Because if you only hear them, you're good. But if you see it, it's too late for you. Many a boater has come upon what looks like floating reeds or lakeweed. But in actuality, it's the hair of this little creature floating at the surface, and just below it, this little thing is waiting for you to fall into their trap. Number 5, Chernobyl. I've made the executive decision to kick off today with the most obvious location. For those who might not be aware of the horrors of Chernobyl, allow me to start today off with a mini sad history lesson. So the disaster was a nuclear accident that occurred on the 26th of April of 1986 at the number 4 reactor in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant near the city of Pripyat. It is one of only 2 nuclear energy accidents rated at 7, which is the maximum severity on the International Nuclear Event Scale, the other being the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan. The meltdown and explosions ruptured the reactor core. And destroyed the reactor building. So this was immediately followed by an open-air reactor core fire, which lasted until May 4th of 1986, during which airborne radioactive contaminants were released and deposited onto other parts of the USSR and Europe. Approximately 70% landed in Belarus, around 16 kilometers away. The fire released about the same amount of radioactive material as the initial explosion. In response to the initial accident, a 10-kilometer radius exclusion zone was created 36 hours after the accident, from which approximately 49,000 people were evacuated, primarily from Pripyat. The exclusion zone was later increased to a radius of 30 kilometers, from which an additional 68,000 people were evacuated. Following the disaster, Pripyat was abandoned and eventually replaced by the new purpose-built city of Slavutych. In July of 2019, the Ukrainian president announced that the Chernobyl site would become an official tourist attraction. Immunology experts recommend that tourists wear clothes and shoes they are comfortable with throwing away, avoid plant life, especially the depths of the forest due to the high levels of radiation. Oh, why? Oh, just because the areas were not cleaned in the aftermath of the disaster and remain highly contaminated. Research showed that fungus, moss, and mushrooms are radioactive. So among the buildings that were abandoned were multiple local schools, with the small city having 15 preschools for just under 5,000 attendees. Most of the buildings in the city are practically empty, but not the schools. School books and class magazines were clearly of no value to looters, and city residents were more worried about saving at least something from their personal property, leaving the buildings almost intact, minus the effects of being left empty over time. Moving on to other places of note, the Pripyat amusement park was set to have its grand opening on the 1st of May in 1986, in time for the May Day celebrations, but those plans were cancelled on April 26. Several sources report that the park was opened for a short time on the 27th before the announcement to evacuate the city was made to distract the residents from the unfolding disaster nearby. Constructed under the Soviet Union as a park of culture and rest, typical of many large cities in the then Soviet Union, the amusement park's attractions were manufactured by the firm Attraction, who were responsible for the construction of many of the amusement parks which remain to be seen around the former Soviet Union today in various states of repair. Located northwest to the Palace of Culture in the center of Pripyat, the park had 5 attractions: the iconic 26-meter Ferris wheel titled Circular Overview, the Autodrome bumper cars, a paratrooper ride called Chamomile, Russian swing boats, and also a carnival shooting game. Fun fact, the successor to the original company is still manufacturing the Ferris wheel, paratrooper, and bumper cars with a similar design as of 2017. Radiation levels around the park vary. The liquidators washed radiation into the soil after the helicopters carrying radioactive materials used the grounds as a landing strip, so concrete areas are less radioactive. However, areas where moss is built up can emit levels amongst the highest levels of radiation in the whole area. So the Ferris wheel actually made news in September of 2017 when Polish tourists turned it mechanically for the first time since 1986, later returning it to its original position. As much as it would be fascinating to explore history, I'll wait till it's a little less detrimental to my health. Number 4, the Paris catacombs. Deep underground the city of Paris are hundreds of miles of tunnels in a complex network that is one of the oldest in the world. It's a darker city that few tourists experience due to the high risk of danger. You know, people often get lost. The walls can also collapse at any moment, so many who venture there wear miners' helmets. There's no electricity among the endless winding canals. There's no electricity amongst the endless winding canals, corridors, and crypts filled with mounds of unidentified skulls, which are estimated to be about 6 million deceased Parisians. There are parts so tight that you have to lie on your belly and slither forward like a worm to get through. Only a small section of the catacombs is accessible to tourists, while the rest has been illegal to enter since 1955. Look, I'm not saying you shouldn't explore the tourist accessible areas. Heck, I want to visit those myself, but stay out of the illegal areas. Urban explorers who frequent the catacombs call themselves cataphiles, which I must admit is a very smart moniker. They paint, sculpt, and create other art, while also building false walls, trapdoors, and secret chutes to keep away the cataflicks or catacops who try to catch them trespassing. You must know a cataphile who can be your guide to even try to explore the unknown, or else risk getting lost or stuck for who knows how long. As much as I love exploring creepy history, the thought of getting lost in such a cursed place is a type of scared I'm not fond of, and don't particularly ever want to experience. Number 3, the island of Poveglia. Yep, an entirely abandoned island, and it's got quite the history. So the island is located in the lagoon near Venice, and is famous for being one of the most haunted places in all of Italy. Tourists and locals alike are banned from the island, which was used for centuries as a place to exile the sick, to prevent the spread of disease, and contain the mentally ill in an asylum built in the late 1800s. Yeah, I'll backtrack and elaborate. In 1348, the bubonic plague arrived in Venice and Poveglia, like many other small islands at the time, and it became a quarantine colony. The plague on average killed 1 out of 3 Europeans, so fearing the crazy spread of the disease, Venice exiled many of its symptom-bearing citizens there. Go! At the island center, the dead and those too sick to protest were burned on giant pyres. This included the tens of thousands of Venice citizens dying on the mainland. These fires were burned once more in 1630 when the Black Death again swept through the city. The small island was used as a mass burial ground, and ashes from human remains make up as much as 50% of the island's soil, so I hope it's a good fertilizer. The deaths of nearly 160,000 people on the island have given it its nickname, the Island of Ghosts. A doctor at the asylum was known to have experimented on patients with crude lobotomies and jumped from the bell tower in the 1930s after claiming he'd been driven mad by ghosts. Decades later, nearby residents claimed to still hear the bell, although it was removed many years earlier. A report titled Haunted History states that some restoration work has started in recent history, but abruptly stopped without explanation, so maybe this is one spot on today's list that I don't want to visit, ever. Number 2, Bodie State Historic Park. Formerly a genuine gold mining town located east of the Sierra Nevada mountain range in Mono County, California, and now a national landmark, it is known known as one of the best preserved ghost towns in the world. It is named after W.S. Bodie, first name unknown, but rumored to be either William or Waterman, who discovered gold in 1859 in an area now known as Brody Bluff. He tragically passed away in a snowstorm that same winter and was never present for what came to be. According to pioneer Judge McClinton, the district's name was changed from the proper spelling of B-O-D-E-Y to B-O-D-Y, and then a few other phonetic variations to eventually B-O-D-I-E after a painter in the nearby boomtown of Aurora later-day signed as such, an accidental typo that got stuck through history, which is a good reminder to proofread your work. While the output from the mine is largely insignificant in terms of mining history, the violence and early endings to lives tell a different story. A particularly harsh winter between 1878 and 79 claimed hundreds of lives, with many others perishing from falling timber and explosions underground. Bodie as a town grew to have a reputation for violence and lawlessness, and unlike other mining camps at the time, killings were daily events. Robberies, stage holdups, and fights happened at such a frequency that no complete record could be kept. Reverend F.M. Warrington would describe the area in 1881 as a sea of sin, lashed by tempests of lust and passion. The first of 4 mysterious fires tore through the business district in 1892, the next destroying the town mill in 1912, and another destroying the same mill again in 1898. The last of the unknown fires demolished most of what was left of the now ghost town in 1932, taking many lives too soon in the process. When the last producing mine shut down after 1945, very few people were left living in what was left of the town, and all eventually met untimely ends. One man shot his wife unprompted, and 3 other men from the town took it upon themselves to take his life for the act. According to historians, the ghost of that man would visit the 3 men after his passing, shaking his fist and appearing as if he was cursing them out. Those men soon died of mysterious diseases and illnesses. Visitors to the area have reported meeting spirits that leave them feeling suffocated, seeing doors open and close on their own, and rocking chairs that may or may not have a menacing older lady staring them down, or even the empty chair rocking on its own. Nowadays, if you remove anything from the land, even like a little pebble, you'll be cursed with remorse and tragedy. The curse is upheld by the ghosts of residents past, who guard against thieves and protect the town's treasures. So kleptos, steer clear or be cursed. Number 1. Plymouth. The Caribbean island of Monserrat was quite the getaway spot in the 1980s after music producer Sir George Martin opened a recording studio there called Air. The appeal of working with his team and spending a few weeks or months recording in a tropical paradise was so compelling that the world's most famous rock stars, had a good time there. We're talking like Mick Jagger, Elton John, Stevie Wonder, and Paul McCartney all laid down tracks. The party sadly ended abruptly when twin disasters struck the island. Beginning on the 18th of July in 1995, a series of huge eruptions at the South Friar Hills volcano, which had been inactive for centuries, sent pyroclastic flows and ash falls across a wide area of southern Montserrat, including the capital of Plymouth. On the 21st of August in 1995, tephra fell on Plymouth, necessitating an evacuation that lasted until September 3rd. Following renewed volcanic activity on the 1st of December, residents were evacuated for the second time, but were allowed back on the 1st of January. On April 3rd, it was evacuated for the 3rd and final time. The island was divided into risk zones. During some periods, entry into Plymouth was prohibited, and at other times it was allowed during daytime only to those with a means of rapid escape. And the last time that access was legally allowed to the area during daytime was June 16th of 1997, which was right before I was born. On the 25th of June, a further massive eruption produced pyroclastic surges that killed 19 people and reached nearly to the island's airport on the eastern side of the island, which had remained open until that time. Between the 4th to the 8th of August of that year, a further series of large eruptions destroyed approximately 80% of the town, burying it under 1.4 meters of ash. This hot material burned many of the buildings, making habitation nearly impossible for many of the residents. The flows, lava, ash, and other volcanic rock types were mostly compact, having a density similar to that of concrete. The removal of the overburden would have required the use of explosives, bulldozers, and other resources way too expensive for all of this. It was anticipated that the soil underneath the hardened mud and lava would have been scorched and left completely non-arable by the intense heat of the pyroclastic flows. The entire south half of the island was declared an exclusion zone because of the continuing volcanic activity at the hills. So the government of the island was moved north to the town of Brady's, although Plymouth still remains the technical capital. Recently, Montserrat has begun chaperoning driving tours into the exclusion zone, where visitors can walk through the ruins of the former capital, which now lies buried under some 20 feet of ash and stone, where the smoking volcano still pumps over 350 tons of sulfur dioxide into the sky every day. During a tour, one sees modern concrete buildings shattered by the unbelievable force of nature. Over 10 feet of ash and mud have buried so much of the city that in certain areas only rooftops poke up from the dust. We're talking like papers and envelopes are stacked on desktop piles of work, which were made pointless by the pile of ash that fills up the floor and outside balconies. 19 people died from breaking the law and entering the exclusion zone before it was safe, by the way. The hot gas cooked their lungs, and they looked similar to mummies when they were eventually found. Yeah, big pass from me. In 5th place, we have high school. Ryan Draper and Tori Adamczyk were students at Pocatello High School in Idaho that were interested in films and decided to try to record their own. It starts off innocent enough with a frame showing a crowded high school hallway before cutting to the night of September 22nd. I believe we have the video, so you can see the transition for yourself right now. The two boys are in a car and you can overhear Brian saying, "We're here in this car." The time is 9:50, September 22nd, 2006. Unfortunately, we have the grueling task of killing our two friends and they are right in that house just down the street. Tori goes on to explain that they had already been hanging out with the soon-to-be victim that evening, Cassie Jo Stoddard, while she was, house-sitting for her aunt and uncle on Whispering Cliffs Drive in northeast Bannock County. Her boyfriend Matt Beckham had also been in attendance for the hangout, but went home before the unfortunate events. Cassie had given the friends a tour of the house, including the basement. She was house-sitting for her aunt and uncle. The four teens went into the living room to watch a movie, but the would-be criminals left before the film ended, claiming they wanted to watch a movie at the local movie theater instead. She was unaware that before the boys left, Brian had unlocked the basement door so that he and Tori could re-enter the house undetected. Sometime after leaving the house on Whispering Cliffs, the duo returned to the neighborhood, parked down the street, got out of their car, and put on costumes consisting of dark clothing, gloves, and white painted masks. The boys entered the house through the basement door that had been left unlocked, while the couple that was left there were watching television in the living room, as planned, intentionally making loud noises when they got downstairs in an unsuccessful attempt to lure the couple down there. When that didn't work, they found the circuit breaker and turned off the power in the house, hoping, one or two of them would come down to check the breaker, but that didn't work either, and they were freaking out upstairs. At approximately 10:30 p.m., Matt's mother picked him up, leaving Cassie at the house alone. He called Tori's cell phone to see where he and Brian were, and could barely hear him since he was whispering, so Matt assumed the boys were at the movie theater, as planned. Eventually, the boys went upstairs, armed with stabby implements, and attacked and ended the life of Cassie. Afterwards, they filmed their conversation. Why not? With Brian clearly stating that they just killed Cassie, just left her house, and that it wasn't a bleeping joke. He further elaborated on how he impaled her in the throat and saw her lifeless body. A lot of which nope, can't say that here. The footage in total is over half an hour, and it made me sick to my stomach to watch. Both boys were arrested on September 27th, 2006, and eventually received sentences of life imprisonment without parole. Good riddance. In 4th place, we have the elusive White Lady of Union Graveyard. Located in Connecticut, Lorraine Warren, one of our favorite people, used to often take walks through the cemetery in question, saying that it was one of the most haunted places around. Now her husband, Ed, caught the White Lady on camera on September 1st of 1990 at 2:40 a.m. during his 7th night in a row of filming at the cemetery. Determined to have footage as proof, and we can show some of that footage to you now. He described dark figures surrounding her, shapes that he described as wood ghosts that seemed to jump on her while they all argued. Who is this mysterious lady? Because I love a good spooky lady. It's believed she is Harriet Seeley, whose young son passed shortly after being born, and Harriet herself passing soon after. Legend believes she may have died in hopes of finding her son, and still wanders her final resting place searching him out. She's described as a young woman wearing a white dress with dark hair. Many who have witnessed her believe they have almost hit her with their vehicle, only to find no trace of her once they pull over. Others claim they have often seen her hovering slightly above the ground around the cemetery, going back and forth amongst different gravestones. In 1993, local firefighter Glenn Powell received a call about a transformer explosion and drove to the scene of the incident with a police officer and observed a female driver following closely behind him on the road. He remembers the night sky had turned pink, and the explosion emitted large amounts of electricity that made the hair in his arms stand up at a close distance. Glenn was driving along the road beside the cemetery when the officer seated next to him yelled, "Watch out!" In the middle of the road was a woman with long brown flowing hair and wearing a white Victorian nightgown. Glenn described seeing a surprised look on her face before slamming on the brakes, but was unable to avoid hitting her, describing it like hitting a brick wall with the back of his truck flying into the air and the policeman next to him being launched into the dashboard. The driver behind him jumped out of the car and helped the two men search the area of the crash to check on the woman, but she was gone. Glenn is quoted as saying there was no red fluid, there was no clothing, there was no body, there was nothing. The footage of the White Lady was considered lost for many years, never making its way to the internet until after the passing of the Warrens, when their son-in-law Tony found the tape in a lost corner and uploaded it here to the interwebs. Glad we've got it. In 3rd place, we have lake monster footage. In June of 2009, a cell phone video of a creature swimming in Lake Champlain near Oakledge Park in Burlington caught some attention. The nearly 2-minute-long video, taken by Burlington resident Eric Olson, shows the creature moving across the mouth of the small cove and beach area at the park. At several points during the video, the whatever it is appears to raise its head about a foot or more above the water's surface. Other times, a portion of what appears to be a torso, several feet in length, can also be seen. Eric has been adamant in saying that he was simply filming the water when he noticed the cryptid and tried to zoom in on it. He says that anyone watching it can see that whatever it was moving both horizontally across the water and vertically, going under the surface and coming back up. He described it as looking very long, but not very wide. Now, Lauren Coleman is a cryptozoologist based in Portland, Maine, and said what Olsen filmed with his phone is the best evidence to date of what residents on both sides of Lake Champlain would prefer to call Champ. He stated that the video should be forensically analyzed and broken down frame by an expert. Before that day, the best known Champ evidence was a photo taken in 1977 by Sandra Mancy of Bristol while she was having a picnic on the lake with her family. The photo was verified as legitimate and later appeared in Time magazine and the New York Times. I'm sorry, who was gonna tell me there's oodles of evidence of a sea monster here in Canada? Yikes! In second place, we have stalker footage. Parasocial relationships are the incredibly terrifying, one-sided bond a fan or follower think they have with a public figure, and sadly can lead to scary stories. I'm speaking from experience, and this is one point I won't be elaborating on. Icelandic pop star Bjork learned this, sadly, when an American fan sent her an explosive device in disguise and then, offed himself, leaving behind 22 hours of videotape. Ricardo Lopez was described by his peers as extremely bright, but dropped out of high school to become an artist. As well as the videotapes, he left behind an 803-page handwritten diary full of the musings of, someone embarrassed by his body and awkward around girls. Okay, but I'm not a killer. Ricardo escaped his life by reading about the glamorous world of celebrities, fixating on Bjork as his muse that he created art around. But soon the fan love entered the gray area of obsession. And that's the danger zone of being a fan. He recorded himself talking to the camera, saying that being in love, having an infatuation is a euphoric feeling, and he was very happy. He had something to look forward to every day. The diary shows how the fantasy eventually turned, more and more consuming, and how Ricardo slowly became less and less anchored in reality. 3 years into his obsession, he read that Bjork had a lover, and he wrote in his diary about his sadistic plans to inflict pain onto her. Ricardo constructed an explosive device using sulfuric acid and placed it inside a hollowed-out book, also forging a letter from her record company telling her the book was for a future project. We actually have footage of him building that device, and I'll let that play now. He managed to acquire the address for her London home and mailed the package off, in hopes that she would open it and it would explode right in her face. Ricardo went home, still savoring the drama after he mailed it off. One tape showed him saying to the camera, "It went off almost without a hitch. I'm shaking more and more, but I was real cool in there, just a little bit nervous." With his device now almost at Bjork's doorstep, Lopez began the final act for his tape, taking his life. In his video, Ricardo said he knew many killers had families that were brutal, but said his own family was normal and kind, and he played Bjork's music in the background. His last words were, "This is for you," before pulling the trigger. On the video, a kaboom noise rang out, but there was no visible fluids. Ricardo just groaned and fell out of frame. Police found his body 4 days after the incident and were able to stop the package 1 day before it caused the intended harm. On September 16th of 1996, police found the camera and a videotape labeled "The Last Day." Several other cassettes were also nearby, and personally, this is the scariest video for me today. I've watched enough Criminal Minds to know premeditated killings are a thing, but this is a whole other level of terrifying. Oh, people. In first place, we have the Paris catacombs. For those who do not know, the catacombs are a series of underground tunnels that are located underneath Paris that were created during the late 18th century to help alleviate the city's cemetery shortage crises. Fun fact, there are approximately 6 million bodies buried in the catacombs alone, which, you're the one, that's a lot of ghosties. In recent times, however, the catacombs have become a popular place for urban explorers, who have dubbed themselves cataphiles. One significant example of this is a man who took some footage of the catacombs of Paris sometime in the early 1990s. I'll kick this off with a snippet now before I describe it. The footage, which was shot on a black and white video recorder, starts as rather unremarkable, with the man exploring around the catacombs, and hey, he even picks up a few bones along the way. Wouldn't recommend it, but he did. As the video goes on, however, the man begins to walk at a faster pace before breaking into a run and drops the camera before running off into the darkness. It landed in a puddle on its side, and that's where it stayed, as it filmed the man's feet running away. The point of view shot became disorienting as he ran, swinging from tunnel to tunnel, seeming to reflect his confusion about which one he should run down next. Sometime after that, the footage was found by a different group of cataphiles in one of the deepest areas of the catacombs, before being acquired by a documentarian by the name of Francis Friedland. He later presented the footage on the second episode of the ABC Family Show, Scariest Places on Earth, in the year 2000. Nobody has stepped up after the initial airing of the episode nearly 2 decades ago, including Friedland himself. Nobody has stepped up after the initial airing of the episode over 2 decades ago, including Friedland himself. No one knows what happened to the man in the video, or who he was to this day.
At lucky number 5 is Joliet Correctional Center. The Joliet Correctional Center, established in Joliet, Illinois in 1858, holds a storied past that is as captivating as it is haunting. This historic penitentiary served as a house of horrors for over 150 years, housing some of the state's most notorious criminals. Within its imposing stone walls lie a rich history of many eerie and disturbing tales. But the most chilling of these tales is that of the murder of the warden's wife in 1915. Odette Allen, better known simply as the warden's wife, was an aspiring singer before marrying her husband, Warden Ned Allen. The marriage would have her move from her home in Los Angeles to living in the Joliet Correctional Center with her betrothed. Odette was incredibly popular among the inmates. She was known to be a kind and compassionate woman who tried to make the lives of the prisoners a little more bearable by offering them small acts of kindness, such as providing treats or lending a listening ear to their troubles. The inmates would call her things like the Good Angel and the Little Mother at the Big Stir, out of admiration for her benevolence. The inmates would often act as servants to her and the warden, as an alternative to hard prison labor. In June of 1915, the warden went to Chicago to meet with politicians about the building of a new prison. Odette didn't join her husband because the dresses she wanted to wear weren't yet ready. One morning, Odette asked for the help of Joe Campbell, also known as Chicken Joe, a prisoner who had been convicted of murder at the age of 29. He was selected to be Odette's personal servant because of his great behavior and his healthy relationship with her and the warden. He was due for parole the next week, and Odette was going to testify for him at his hearing. Sounds like life was looking up for Chicken Joe, but what happened next would tragically bring all these good things to ruin for the young prisoner. The morning of her death, Odette asked Joe to refill her water bottle, go grab her coffee and a newspaper, and to walk her dog. To this, Joe obliged, but then an hour later, he would return to the house with smoke coming from Odette's bedroom window. Firefighters were quick to the scene, but were not fast enough, as once they extinguished the flames, Odette's charred body was already laying still on the bed. Upon investigation, they discovered that Odette was SA'd and killed before the bed was set on fire, and suspicions immediately turned to Chicken Joe. Joe was the subject of much scrutiny from police, Illinois citizens, and even fellow prisoners. Even after adamantly pleading innocence, Joe was sentenced to death by the court, but his sentence was changed to life in prison at the last second by a sympathetic governor who believed his story. After the tragedy, strange things started happening in the prison. Many inmates and guards would report seeing or hearing Odette still wandering the halls. There have also been some cases of hearing her singing in the nearby prison cemetery. One night in the 1930s, about 5,000 people went to the cemetery armed in an attempt to vanquish the apparition, but no one could find her anywhere. Amidst the chaos, a dozen people went missing, supposed victims of the ghost. Which to me is crazy. Like, at what point are you so scared of a ghost you need 5,000 people just to get rid of it? And they still didn't even find her. Just give up at that point, guys, come on. Anyway, it is said that Odette remains in the prison in order to protect her boys, the prisoners who were inspired by her kindness and honored her after death through their good behavior. Any visitor that would try to disturb her peace would incur the poltergeist's wrath and suddenly disappear. If you were to visit the prison today, which closed in 2002 and was turned into a historical site, there's still a good chance you might come across Odette's ghost, still wandering and singing. Next up at number 4 is the Congress Plaza Hotel. Constructed in 1893 as part of the World's Columbian Exposition, the Congress Plaza Hotel has welcomed countless guests over the years, including prominent figures such as presidents, celebrities, and even infamous gangsters. Its iconic location overlooking Grant Park and Lake Michigan has made it a popular choice for visitors seeking a taste of vintage luxury. But it is the hotel's dark past and ghostly residents that have set it truly apart. One of the most well-known ghosts said to haunt the hotel is that of a ghostly presence known as the Shadow Man. His story dates back to 1900, when Captain Louis Ostheim, a war veteran haunted by the horrors of the Spanish-American War, sought refuge at the hotel on the eve of his wedding. The captain would often experience PTSD-induced night terrors and suffer from extreme anxiety and paranoia. The night of his death, he awoke suddenly after being consumed by a brutal episode. In his disoriented state, he would search for solace or an escape from his inner demons, and tragically, he took his own life. Ever since that fateful night, the spirit of Captain Ostheim has been seen walking through the Congress Plaza Hotel, appearing as a shadowy figure gliding through the halls with a haunting aura. Guests and staff have reported encountering the Shadow Man on multiple occasions, his spectral form silently following their footsteps, as if seeking some elusive connection or unfinished business. Those unlucky enough to meet the Shadow Man's gaze would begin feeling greatly distressed and having night terrors of their own, some meeting the same fate as him after the fact. As the years have passed, the legend of the Shadow Man has become deeply ingrained in the history of the Congress Plaza Hotel, adding to its reputation as one of Illinois' most haunted locations. The spirit's enigmatic presence, coupled with the tragic circumstances that led to his lingering existence, makes encounters with the Shadow Man as eerie and thought-provoking as they are dangerous. Do any of you guys see any ghosts while staying in a hotel? Leave a comment, because I feel like these days every hotel on the planet is haunted. Next, at number 3, is the Englewood Post Office. H.H. Holmes, no relation to Sherlock, was a deceptive figure who gained infamy in the late 19th century as one of America's first documented serial killers. Operating during the time of the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, Holmes constructed a nightmarish building with a name I'm not even allowed to say on YouTube. But for the sake of brevity, I'll call it Death Castle. Officially named the Holmes Castle or the World's Fair Hotel, Death Castle was a 3-story building located on the corner of 63rd and Wallace Street in the Englewood neighborhood of Chicago. From the outside, it looked the same as any other ordinary commercial building, complete with shops and apartments. However, its true purpose was far more sinister. Inside the castle, Holmes had constructed a labyrinth of secret passages, hidden staircases, and windowless rooms designed for his nefarious deeds. He used his magnetic charm to lure and manipulate unsuspecting victims, often young women and visitors to the World's Fair, into his deadly lair. The castle featured soundproof rooms, gas chambers, trap doors, and a chilling basement equipped with dissection tables and vats of acid. Holmes would typically seduce and swindle his victims before leading them to their deaths. Many were asphyxiated with gas, mutilated, tormented both psychologically and physically, and killed in various gruesome ways. Once they were deceased, Holmes would dispose of their bodies through the building's hidden chutes, transporting them to the basement for disposal. His exact number of victims remains a mystery, but it is believed he may have killed anywhere from 20 to 200 people during his spree. His sinister acts continued undetected for years, aided by his ability to change aliases frequently, making it difficult for authorities to track him down. Holmes' reign of terror finally came to an end when he was arrested in 1894 for an unrelated insurance fraud scheme. That castle didn't pay for itself, I guess. As investigators delved into his background, they began uncovering evidence for his horrifying crimes. On May 7th, 1986, H.H. Holmes was executed. Before his death, he confessed to 27 killings, but hinted at a much higher body count. Afterwards, the infamous Death Castle was later destroyed by a mysterious fire, and a post office was built atop the ruins. Within the Englewood post office, it is said that you can still hear the many screams of Holmes' victims. And there have been reports of those who dared venture to the basement, which survived the fire, and you can still see Holmes killing one of his 200 victims, a phantom that echoes the terrifying events that occurred over a century ago. I just got the chills. Next up, at number 2, is a short one. Resurrection Cemetery. Located in Justice, Illinois, the Resurrection Cemetery holds what it is known to be Illinois' most famous ghost, known only as Resurrection Mary. The story goes that Mary was a vibrant and lively dancer who attended the dance hall in the 1930s. One fateful night, she left the hall after an argument with her partner and decided to walk home alone along Archer Avenue. Tragically, Mary was struck and killed by a hit-and-run driver while walking along the desolate road. Since then, motorists driving along the street will often see Mary's ghost walking along the road wearing a white gown and dancing shoes. In some cases, Mary will appear as a hitchhiker, but by the time the car reaches Resurrection Cemetery, she would suddenly vanish, occasionally taking the driver with her. Remember guys, don't pick up mysterious, ghostly women off the side of the road. It's called stranger danger, and we should all know it by now. Moving on to number 1 is Menteno State Mental Hospital. Established in Menteno, Illinois in 1930, the Menteno State Mental Hospital initially served as a psychiatric facility for mentally ill and developmentally disabled patients, offering them treatment and care. However, over the years, the hospital's conditions deteriorated, leading to allegations of beatings, neglect, and the mistreatment of its vulnerable inhabitants. These inhumane conditions only worsened as time passed, with tales of neglect, experimentation, and even deaths due to inadequate medical attention began to spread, shrouding the institution and its reputation in darkness and sorrow. The hospital was at its worst when 384 patients and staff came down with typhoid fever in 1939 in an incident referred to as the Menteno Madness. The director of the hospital mistook the affliction to be nothing more than a case of diarrhea, but when patients and staff began dying, panic set in. Patients banging on windows, orderlies going missing, doctors deliberately injuring their patients. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. Those who died during the Manteno Madness would later haunt the abandoned asylum after its closure in 1985. Those who visited the old hospital would report seeing patients and doctors alike scurrying about the abandoned halls, but it was those who ventured into the tunnels beneath the hospital that were in real danger. Paranormal investigators have gone down into the tunnels in hopes of finding the rumored ghosts, but are met with a much more sinister presence. It is said that the malevolent doctors who would mistreat their patients wander the complex of tunnels, hoping to release their rage upon anyone stupid enough to enter their domain. What was once a place that healed was now a place that harmed, enthralling thrill seekers to see the mad doctors for themselves, only to pay an unfortunate price. After the repeated disappearances of ghost hunters, urban explorers, vandals, and the like, the building was demolished by Wrecking Ball in 2015 to discourage anyone from entering the haunted grounds.
Number 5. The Gates of Hell. Coming up first on the list of cursed places today is going to be the Gates of Hell in Turkmenistan. Yeah, I bet you didn't know that that's where hell was. It's in Turkmenistan. No, don't worry, we're not being so literal. This place is not for the faint of heart, as it's said to be one of the most cursed locations on the planet. The Gates of Hell is a massive crater located in the middle of the Karakum Desert. Legend has it that this pit was created when Soviet geologists drilled into a pocket of natural gas, causing the ground beneath their rig to collapse and exposing a vast underground cavern filled with gas. The geologists then decided to set the gas on fire to prevent poisonous gas from spreading. I'm not a scientist or a gas man or anything, but that feels like the wrong move, because the fire has been burning for over 50 years, creating an endless and infernal pit of flames that can reach up to 30 feet high. Probably a pretty cool place to keep a music festival. According to local folklore, the fiery pit is said to be a portal to the underworld, with demonic entities and lost souls trapped within the flames. Visitors have reported feeling an overwhelming sense of dread and unease while standing near the crater, as if they're being watched by something malevolent. Some have even gone so far as to say they see shadowy figures moving in the flames. Others have heard disembodied voices and screams emanating from the pit. This also bears mentioning, and skip ahead if you're arachnophobic, but there's reports of a strange phenomenon of spiders en masse walking into the pit. They walk right into the fire and just burn right up. They're drawn to heat and light, but of course it does also seem like it's a mass spider sacrifice, which just seems a little too satanic for me. And if that wasn't nearly enough to scare you, there are also people who claim that there are strange rituals being performed near the crater with mysterious symbols and offerings left at the edge of the pit. I think I will stay to the edge of my house and go nowhere near them. Number 4. Houska Castle in the Czech Republic. Houska Castle. Houska Castle. Houska Castle. Kaska Houskal. I'll say that right one time. Houska Castle. This gothic masterpiece is located in the heart of the Czech Republic and has a dark and terrifying history that'll send a chill down your spine. Legend has it that Houska Castle was built in the 13th century to seal a gateway to hell that had opened up on the site. Now, they didn't pay attention, the gateway to hell is in Turkmenistan. We just covered that. According to local folklore, the castle was constructed by prisoners who were promised their freedom if they could build it without windows or doors, creating an impenetrable fortress that would keep the demons and other malevolent entities at bay. But that's not all. There's more scares coming. Houska Castle has been the site of numerous supernatural occurrences and is said to be haunted by the ghosts of its past inhabitants. Visitors have reported seeing apparitions, hearing strange noises and whispers, and feeling an overwhelming sense of dread while inside the castle's walls. One of the more unnerving legends about Houska Castle involves a bottomless pit that is said to be located beneath it. According to legend, prisoners were thrown into the pit to determine whether or not it was a gateway to hell. The screams of the doomed souls who were thrown in are said to still be heard echoing through the castle's halls. The acoustics are just great, let me tell you. Some people have reported feeling like that they're being watched by something, while others have reported feeling a cold breeze and a sense of oppression, as if something sinister is waiting. Despite this castle's haunting reputation and all these various reasons why you should never go anywhere near it, it remains a popular destination for thrill seekers and horror enthusiasts. Number 3. The Zone of Silence. Up next, we're going to be talking about the Zone of Silence, which is one of the most threatening names I've heard for a place in a while. It sounds like a place where like an evil emperor would send you to be punished. And in a sense, that could be considered true. It's a place where radio signals can't be received and compasses spin uncontrollably. Some people even say that time passes differently there. What is happening? Located in the middle of the Chihuahuan Desert, the Zone of Silence is the nickname given to a mysterious patch of desert with strange properties. Legends say that the zone was born out of the site of a meteorite crash in the 70s, which caused a nuclear-like explosion. Since then, it's become a hotspot for all manner of paranormal mystery. Lights in the sky, unexplained disappearances, and a whole lot more. Now there's all kinds of conspiracies and speculation about what happens here, but one of the more interesting ones that stood out to me has got to be the legend of a group of cryptids called the Silent Ones. These creatures are said to be humanoid with elongated limbs and featureless faces, and they emit a deafening silence. Those who are brave enough to venture forth into the Zone of Silence say that they feel as if they're being watched by something there. Is it the Silent Ones? Aliens? Government surveillance? All I know is I'm not going anywhere near a place called the Zone of Silence to check. I'll stay in my zone of noise. Thank you very much. Number 2, Lake Natron. Our next entry is Lake Natron in Tanzania. It's instantly recognizable because the lake does not look at all like the kind of lake you'd want to go for a dip in. This scarlet red water is a sight to behold. But if you believe the legends surrounding the lake, the water is also said to be cursed by the gods themselves. And I think it has a shiny Gyarados in there too. Now there is a reasonable scientific explanation for why the lake looks like it would be Dracula's dream vacation spot. It's not running red from any body fluids, but rather a high concentration of salt and other minerals in the water, giving it a ghastly hue. But like I mentioned before, local folklore says that the lake is cursed by the Maasai people, who believe that the lake is home to evil spirits that prey on unsuspecting visitors. Here's another fun tidbit about the lake's lore. There are legends that animals that come into contact with the Crimson Lake will be instantly calcified, turning into stone statues due to the lake's incredibly dangerously high salt content. And I thought the Blizzard forums were salty. That's a little gamer joke for you. There are those who say a similar fate await humans, but so far as I know, I don't think anyone's tried. The lake is dangerous enough, what with being boiling hot as well. I don't think anyone's willing to dip a pinky toe in there just to see if it'll freeze. There's also been strange reports of strange lights and apparitions appearing around the lake, as if the spirits of the dead are rising up from its depths. Is it a gateway to the underworld? A melting pot between our world and theirs? And does red water taste differently? I feel like it might have, like, I don't know, maybe a raspberry or strawberry flavor. I'm not really willing to try, but let me know out there if anyone has. Number 1, Snake Island. Our final entry today is going to be the Isla de Quimera Grande, which is formerly dubbed as Snake Island, which really should tell you everything you need to know about this place. You cannot expect this to be welcoming. Traditionally, when places are named things like Snake Island, they're usually filled to bursting with snakes, or they're like home to a snake-themed supervillain or something. I'm pretty sure the guys who fought G.I. Joe lived on Snake Island. Well, Snake Island earned its name because, guess this, by conservative estimates, there's roughly a snake for every square meter. Estimates suggest there's anything from 4,000 golden lancehead vipers or more living there. There's more snakes than there are people on this island because most Brazilian locals know far better than to go to an island where one of the most venomous snakes in the world live. Yeah, I left that part out. I'm gonna slide that under the door right now, buried the lead a little bit. It's not just like garter snakes slithering about here. No. Isla de Quimera Grande is home to the golden lancehead, a beautiful creature in its own right, but one of the most lethal snakes on the planet. A bite from this snake can cause kidney damage, necrosis, brain hemorrhaging, venom poisoning, and internal intestinal damage. So yeah, maybe just leave them alone. Maybe. Even if for some bizarre reason you just absolutely love going to places you're not meant to, and you are just dying for a chance to go visit Toxic Snake Island, you're gonna run into a bit of trouble because it is quite literally forbidden. The Brazilian government strictly monitors those who travel to the island. Naval forces visit annually to maintain the lighthouse, and there is a small research station to study and analyze the local population, but all of these visits are accompanied by paramedics and trained doctors just in case any of the locals decide to say hello the only way they know how. And in a weird aside, am I the only one who thinks the golden lancehead is kind of cute in a weird way? I don't know. I kind of like snakes. I don't think I'd want one as a pet, but I don't know. These little danger noodles, they have very cute little eyes and adorable little beady things that I know would do unspeakable things to my body if I ever touched one.
Number 5. Old City Hall. Built in the late 1890s and once the head seat of the municipality of Toronto and County of York, this building now serves the city as its municipal courts. The city's departments were moved to the modern buildings just west of this ornate building with, rather unique architecture. What's in this old building that interests us? Oh, easy. Stories reverberate of all types of different ghostly activity. The rear staircase has a poltergeist that seems to enjoy tugging at judges' robes, as well as walking up and down the stairs where its footsteps can still be heard. The haunting was first reported by Judge S. Tupper Bigelow, who said he would hear footsteps behind him and feel something pulling at his judicial robe. Now, the same experience happened to Judge Pete Wilch. The cellars acted at one time as a holding center for prisoners, and the moans of the incarcerated have been heard as well. The northwest attic is also a spot where a presence is felt, but nobody's quite sure what it is. Courtroom 33 boasts scary encounters of the spirits of what could be the last men sentenced to hang in Canada. The last 2 men to receive the death penalty were Ronald Turpin and Arthur Lucas. Both men were hung by the, neck, and there is actually doubt about their true guilt. Salvation Army chaplain Cyril Everett tried to save both of their lives but was sadly unsuccessful. Serving the spiritual needs of the condemned, he offered both of them last rites and absolution. Upon coming home from the Don jail, his son noticed his red-stained clothing. Now this was due to a miscalculation of the drop, with Arthur's head disconnecting. Yes, minus some connective tissue. So it's said that their ghosts still haunt the property to this day. Now that room is in demand every Halloween by ghost hunters, many of whom haven't been able to stay the full night because of the weird noises and cool fogs that left them glued to the floor. So if you feel like ghost hunting, have at it. Number 4. Casa Loma. If a place has secret tunnels, then chances are there's gonna be a few ghosties roaming around, including a stern-looking old man gazing out from a window, who by the way is probably Sir Henry Pellet, the castle's original owner, a British redcoat in the stable, and a lady in white walking the halls and somebody knocking in the tunnel. Sounds like a party. You know me, I love a good lady in white. So the white lady is believed to be a maid who worked there in the early 1900s, around the time when about 60,000 people in Toronto died of influenza. She's been seen in a lot of places by guests or by cleaning and cafeteria staff as they've been cleaning up at the end of the day. Poltergeists have been reported numerous times in upper levels as well as the basement. The castle even offers ghost tours, led by Canada's most haunted. According to Michelle Desrochers, CMH director and Casa Loma's de facto paranormal rep, they've had stories going on in there since the 1930s when the Kiwanis Club took over the castle. There have been plenty of Casa Loma ghost stories that pop up from time to time, such as, the appearance of a man tending to the garden in the indoor conservatory, or the sound of young people's voices when no young folks are around. Now, a few stories, however, are reported time and time again by different people. A woman believed to be Lady Mary has also been spotted on the grounds, although the rep has pointed out the notoriously private woman has proven elusive. At one point, the Canada's Most Haunted team attempted to film her room, leaving a camera running there while they explored other parts of the castle. When they returned to check the footage though, the tape was gone. According to mediums who have claimed to have felt the presence of Sir Henry and Lady Mary, their spirits aren't trapped there, they just choose to be there after, sadly they were ousted from Casa Loma after being unable to keep up with its costs. And obviously that place is very expensive to keep up. The tunnel leading to the castle stables are where another of its most notorious ghosts is believed to roam. Many have reported feeling as though they have been grabbed or had their hair pulled while in the tunnel. People have also reported hearing the spirit in the tunnel sighing gruffly. And he's even been captured in recordings, speaking and interacting with visitors. In one recording, he's been heard mimicking a medium who said, "Oh, he's a horrible person," while trying to make contact. Now once again, we consult the paranormal rep, and she says the evidence points to the voice belonging to the ghost of a friend of Sir Henry's, who was hired to look after, his prize-winning horses. Okay, maybe it's time to check in with my friends who have worked some events at Casa Loma to see if they've met any of the ghosties. Note to self. Number 3, Mystery on the Mind Reader's Home. Well, this might not be an entry on most popular lists. I'm speaking from experience when it comes to this location. So for those who might be unaware, Mysterion is a world-renowned mind reader and has been featured on shows such as America's Got Talent, Canada's Got Talent, and he's helped fool Penn and Teller, amongst many other accolades. Don't ask me how he does what he does. I genuinely don't know and I can't tell you. But what I do know, and I know this without a doubt, is that he happens to collect a whole slew of oddities and artifacts in his home/museum. So let's start with the tame stuff, his toy collection. Personally, the most interesting things in my opinion are the rare gem dolls on display, the Shirley Temple doll that's still in the box, and the whole wall of wrestling figures. Now when I was first getting into wrestling, it was fun looking at the wall and testing my knowledge, and you know what, it still is. He also has a full Pee-wee Playhouse setup, a Star Wars section, a Superman section, and plenty more that I'm sure he'll show off to me next time I visit. But I can't remember off the top of my head. But that's not the priority here. The oddities collection is. So while I tend to hold my breath whenever I visit the toy room, out of fear of accidentally making a tiny figure move, because I don't know how he gets them all in there, I'm a lot more fearful of the oddities collection. There's everything in that room. Shrunken heads, Atacama mummies, little mermaids, finger necklaces, necklaces of things I can't say on here, plenty of teeth, Victorian hair art. Hell, he used to have the Manson letters displayed on his wall. There's more taxidermy in that room than in most mainstream museums. Yeah, he has a special interest in albino taxidermy, don't ask. And proudly on display in the living room, in all their glory, are the cursed dolls that call this house a home, Leanne and Walt. Now, if you're new to watching, I've actually brought Walt to the studio for a visit before, so I highly recommend watching the video I did on cursed dolls you've never heard of before. Walt is a porcelain baby doll that likes setting fires, and Leanne has a way with telekinesis. So as you can imagine, the place tends to come with its fair share of demonic activity. I've heard tales of jewelry boxes flying off of dressers, clothing items going missing, to make me never want to be in that home alone, or spend the night there. Number 2, the Keg Mansion. Once owned by the powerful Massey family, the Keg Mansion rates pretty high on the radar of Halloween thrill seekers and ghost enthusiasts. Hello. So apparently once upon a time, a maid working for the Masseys was found dead above the main staircase, and it said some nights you can see her hanging from a rope above the front entrance. Apparently the maid took her life because of grief over Lillian's death, or she might have been knocked up by one of the Massey's sons and couldn't bear the shame. I'm going with the latter. Other sightings include weird happenings in the woman's washroom, a young boy playing on the staircase, and other young folks frolicking upstairs and in the kitchen. Now, during the time the Massey family owned the mansion, Lillian Massey did pass away in the second floor bedroom of the house. Now, her ghost is said to be roaming the woman's washroom on the same floor. Now, I have walked by the mansion a number of times when I used to live nearby. Heck, I've even had dinner there once. But I managed to avoid anything following me home, which, thank goodness, I have enough demonic energy in my life as it is. I own a couple of demon dolls. It is what it is. Number 1, Exhibition Place. It should come as no surprise that one of Toronto's oldest collections of buildings at Exhibition Place has a few spine-tingling tales to tell. Jacqueline Edwards, senior archivist at Exhibition Place, compiled a list of the site's spookiest stories. So the General Services building at 2 Manitoba Drive is likely the most haunted building on the grounds. Staff members have heard whistling and footsteps in the hallways, crashing noises with no evidence that anything fell, and the sounds of a cocktail party taking place behind closed doors, like complete with music, drinking glasses, and then there's nobody there. Now, perhaps the ghostly noises can be linked to not 1, but 2 horrible deaths at the building. Built in the early 1900s, the General Services building was originally a hydroelectric power station, but now houses the Exhibition Place Operations Division, security, and, yeah, the archives. In April of 1912, it was the site of a chilling killing. I like a good run. Junk dealer Joseph Rosenthal was found dead in the hydroelectric yard. The only witness to the crime was also attacked and barely survived, but managed to crawl up Strawn Avenue to find help. A hydro employee named Charles Gibson was found responsible, and the death appeared to be over a scrap metal deal that went sour. A few years later, in 1924, another man died in the basement of the building. Michael Sullivan died on Thursday, October 9th, electrocuted while trying to restore power to the city after a devastating fire. Over in the Stanley Barracks, staff members have heard knocking on doors, and then there's nobody there. Sensors often go off in the building for no reason, doors become suddenly unlocked, and items have been moved out of place. After a 13-month investigation of the X, Richard Palmisano, a paranormal activity investigator, found the barracks had the most ghostly activity, including his favorite spirit, a young girl named Jenny. Now, Jenny is apparently looking for her cat. She died in an accident, her scarf got tangled, and well, you make of that what you will, but she's there, and her father's looking after her. Sadly, the barracks also has some negative energy. There's 2 individuals that gravitate to the basement. Nasty people. One's named Bob, and his buddy Dave or David, and they actually terrorize the other spirits. For historical context, the barracks was built in 1841 and originally consisted of 6 buildings, but only 1 remains today, the officers' quarters, which is now a part of the Hotel X, complex. Moving on, built in 1931, the Horse Palace is largely empty throughout the year, only occupied by the Toronto Police Mounted Unit and a riding academy year-round. The riding academy staff have heard phantom horses walking above their heads on the 2nd floor, and several cleaning and security staff have seen a ghostly officer riding his horse, who, tends to vanish when they take a second look. During the Second World War, the exhibition grounds was actually a military camp from 1940 to 46. The Horse Palace was used as a barracks for soldiers waiting for training and then to head over, overseas. And for many folks, this was their last memory of Toronto. So around more than 12,000 men went through the Horse Palace, and quite a few never came back. So many security officers have also mentioned that the horticulture building seems to be the worst in terms of things that go bump in the night. The ghostly activity may have something to do with the building's gruesome past. On September 18th of 1949, this building became a temporary morgue for the burned victims of the SS Neuronic. The ship was docked in Toronto when it burned, killing 118 passengers. The victims were laid out on tables throughout the building. Doctors and nurses worked, with police investigators to identify the bodies so the next of kin could claim them, but so many were badly burned and could only be identified by dental records and fingerprints. And one spooky story, a security officer on duty once responded to an alarm in the middle of the night in the basement and found a water valve had been twisted open, allowing water to freely pour into the room. But this valve could only be opened with fire department equipment, so the firefighters, turned off the valve and they were like, what the heck? Now, when left alone again, the officer heard the sound of someone trying to open the door, the force being used to, kind of unnerve the officer. So running towards the noise, he kicked the crash bar, forcing the door to open to find nobody on the other side. Shaken and pale, he returned to the security office, only to learn his adventure occurred on the anniversary of the ship's disaster.
Number 5. Leap Castle. For 700 years, Leap Castle has proudly stood in Ireland, boasting a rather infamous reputation as the most haunted castle in the world, which I feel is a title it must have really fought hard for. I mean, Dracula had a castle, that's gotta be the most haunted castle. The castle was first built in the 13th century, home to the O'Bannon clan, but it would be adopted by the ruling O'Carroll clan, who seized control of it completely by the 15th century. From here, ownership would pass from father to son, but was punctuated by blood. Rival clans, wars, and even family member assassinations were all par for the course of Leap Castle's bloodied history. A grim oubliette where prisoners would be pushed from a window, landing into a pit of spikes, really completed the castle. After centuries of battles and brawls over the castle, it would eventually be burned in 1922 during the Irish Civil War, where it was then abandoned. Now, it goes without saying that a castle that saw as much bloodshed as this is home to a bevy of trapped spirits. The most present one is the Bloody Chapel spirit. Legend has it that one of the O'Carroll children had his own brother assassinated to gain power. His brother, a member of the clergy, is said to restlessly wander the burnt-out chapel. Visitors report seeing beams of light, the smell of burnt rubber, and the shadow of a priest in the stairwell. There's reports of a spirit of a young girl named Emily, who fell from the rampart in the 16th century and tragically lost her life. There's stories of people seeing the ghost of a young girl walking atop the battlements, dragging a misshapen leg as she walks. Today, you can try to visit the Leap Castle if you're feeling daring enough to contact the owner Sean Bryan, who does offer private tours. It'll be you, him, and all the spirits the castle has to offer. And hey, if you're looking for a vacation to a haunted spot but you don't want to leave your room, why not subscribe to Top 5 Scary? We got more haunted sites than you could visit in a lifetime, and we're just a click away. Moving on. Number 4. Separate prison. Going to prison probably sucks. I've never been, but I have heard bad things. A regular prison is pretty bad enough without the wardens getting too creative with their punishments, and then there's prisons like Australia's infamous separate prisons, where it seems like they were trying to set a world record for cruelty. Built in 1833, it was going to serve as a home for some of England's toughest crooks who had to be shipped all the way down under. A home for the toughest criminals needed to be pretty tough, right? Well, unfortunately, it was. Just in the psychological sense, not physical. Separate prison was inspired by the philosophical concept of the panopticon, a template for a prison where all prisoners would be seen under one watchtower. Inmates were to only ever be referred to by the numbers sewn on their uniforms, and were to wear black hoods at all times they weren't in their cells to help them better reflect on their crimes. I'm sure that went over swimmingly with a bunch of violent criminals. Well, it didn't. It mostly led to inmates going mad or offing each other in the hopes that capital punishment was preferable to being imprisoned there, which is a sign that your system is working. Look, it probably goes without saying that this is a haunted prison now, right? I mean, there's over 1,000 bodies buried in unmarked graves on an island that held a prison where everyone had to wear dark hoods. There's no way it's not haunted. Well, it's on this list, so it is. The prison is now owned by Australia's Parks and Wildlife Services, who offer ghost tours of the grounds, where visitors report all sorts of hauntings. Screams, wailings can be heard wandering through the halls, rocking chairs moving by themselves during the night. There's an option on the prison's website to take a tour with just a lantern to guide you, if you're feeling particularly brave. Number 3. Aokigahara Forest. Aokigahara Forest is often known as the Sea of Trees. It's a hauntingly beautiful park in Japan that carries a dark reputation. Hundreds of people over the years have come to Aokigahara to take their own life, leading to its infamous and dark distinction. Spiritualists and paranormal investigators in Japan believe that because there have been so many tragic deaths that happened in Aokigahara, the forest itself is literally growing denser, and the paranormal activity and dark energy inside as well. This seemingly serene forest has been host to all kind of dark rumors, with some stating that the forest is hallowed ground, haunted by demonic spirits for years. Others claim that the forest drives people to madness due to high deposits of iron, which cause compasses to malfunction, meaning travelers would get hopelessly lost. Some visitors to Aokigahara Forest report hearing screams, wallowing, or crying. while walking through the trees. There's no doubt that there's probably a very dark feeling walking through these trees, knowing everything that's ever transpired there. As well, there's something about the knotted mess of all the branches and bark that seems sort of surreal, not quite of this earth, but maybe that's just the legends doing the work for me. Japanese authorities have been doing their best to try and reclaim the forest's haunted reputation, putting up signposts all over to try and deter anyone who would take their own life to instead reach out, call for authorities, and they're no longer publicizing any cases of this happening, hoping to one day salvage the tormented reputation of an otherwise serene spot. Number 2, Poveglia. I've talked about Poveglia on this channel before, and I almost kind of can't resist bringing it up again because I just find it so fascinating. Describing Poveglia sounds like Italy was intentionally trying to make the setting to a horror movie. It's just off the coast of Venice. Initially, the island served as a quarantine zone for those suffering from the plague. Infected were shipped off to Poveglia to wait out their final days. The trouble was, a lot of the people who would end up getting sent to Poveglia weren't even sick at all, showing minor to no symptoms at all. However, that probably changed pretty quickly once they were sent to a quarantine zone of exclusively sick people. It's said that the ground on Poveglia is so hallowed that there's more ash from human remains than there is soil on the island. Eventually, in 1922, Poveglia underwent a bit of a rebranding, since centuries of being known as the quarantine zone was hurting its image and its tourist economy, and it rebranded as an island home to a mental hospital. Now, of course, this mental hospital was home to doctors who performed sick experiments on their patients, often with little to no care for the patient's well-being. Chisels, drills, lobotomies without any form of anesthetic or proper treatment, all these fun things. It's said that the lead doctor at the facility was eventually so overcome with guilt over what he had done and haunted by the screams and spirits of his patients and victims that he would eventually throw himself off of the tower on the center of the island. Now, to deter all you would-be ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts out there who think Poveglia is sounding like the holy grail of haunted spots, I should warn you that you are probably not going to get in there, as it is extremely forbidden to enter, as in it's illegal. It's punishable to the fullest extent of the law and is considered a criminal act to trespass onto Poveglia. But a better question is, why would you even want to? Some spirits are better left unbothered. At the number 1 spot is Pripyat, the town outside of Chernobyl, the famed nuclear reactor. 50,000 people used to live here, and now it's a ghost town. Sorry, couldn't resist. It's difficult to summarize just exactly what happened in Chernobyl in under a 2-minute time frame, but you know, we can gloss over some of the big details for you. An overload at a nearby reactor caused a nuclear meltdown that ended up causing one of the worst ecological disasters in human history. A massive chain of unfortunate events had to all happen for the incident to play out the way it did, and unfortunately that's exactly how it went. It's a fascinating case, and there are tons and tons of documents and things to read about it, and you should after this video because it's fascinating. 50,000 people had to be evacuated basically overnight, and Pripyat turned into a ghost town, now standing as a harrowing monument to the dangers of unchecked nuclear power. Photos from inside Pripyat almost don't look real. They look like something out of a post-apocalyptic movie, and I guess that kind of makes sense because it is post-apocalyptic when you think about it. Unlike a lot of the others on this list, Pripyat doesn't need any supernatural ghost stories to elicit a sense of fear. It's haunted, definitely, but more so by radiation and unease than anything else. Mutated animals and vegetation, abandoned Ferris wheels, and an unmissable sense of dread in the air certainly paint a picture of one of the Earth's darkest spots. To some, Pripyat is the ultimate dark tourist destination, infamous and wholly unique. There's actually a whole subculture around venturing into the zone for recreation, a group of people who call themselves stalkers after the 1972 film and not the first-person shooter RPG series set in Chernobyl. These people illegally trespass into the surrounding areas of Chernobyl for the ultimate urban exploration thrill. Now, there are guided tours as well of Chernobyl's surrounding areas for those who are less familiar with the dangers of the zone, but want to get up and close and personal nonetheless.
Number 5. Chateau de Monsiger, a petite and quaint fortress in southern France, sitting atop a 170-meter drive uphill. Its ruins now nothing but rock and rubble, but once a safe house for the Cathars. The Cathar vision of the universe was dualist, in that good and light confronts evil and darkness. right? Pretty straightforward. Very Jedi of them. This belief led them to follow a very disciplined way of life. Before, of course, they were decimated from the Catholic Church, initiated by Pope Innocent III. Innocent, huh? The ruins nicknamed now Satan's Synagogue. Yeah, nice and light right off the top, huh, Kyle? Described as one of the last Cathar castles and has been listed as a monument historique by the French Ministry of Culture. Cathar, from Greek meaning pure. These people were devout. In 1233, the site became the seat and head of the Cathar Church. The fort roughly housed about 500 people during this time. In 1242, a military of about 10,000 troops fought against the castle that was held up by only 100 Cathars. So like very Jedi all of a sudden. The siege lasted 9 months. Until 2 years later, the castle finally surrendered. North of 200 Cathars were burned in a giant bonfire unless they renounced and changed their faith, some taking the Cathar vow just weeks before this. Those who renounced the Cathar faith were allowed to leave, but the castle itself destroyed. The field below, now famously known to have been where hundreds of men and women were burned alive. The apparent bonfire that happened sparked a curse from the Cathar peoples. Legends of these ruins say any person who strays off the marked footpaths of these ruins and loses their footing will drop off of every side of the citadel in the sky. Sounds more like a metaphor to me than a curse. Number 4. Kalaupapa. In 1866, during the reign of Kamehameha V, Hawaiian officials passed a law designating this island the official site for patients affected with leprosy. Kalaupapa, a small peninsula in the north shore of Molokai, has quite a bitter and spooky history. The king exiled those who contracted Hansen's disease here, noting it was the ideal spot secluded and surrounded by the highest cliffs in the world. The peninsula served as a natural outdoor prison, accessible only by one steep path by foot or boat to shore. About 1,200 families were exiled to quarantine here. At the time, the disease wasn't really understood, believing it to be very incurable. Whisked off and locked away amid paradise in total isolation. No amenities, no buildings, or even potable water. Known by historians who visit it as, quote, the pit of hell itself. And apparently the most cursed place on earth. Yeah, I didn't know that. With its grim history of loneliness, despair, and death, it's not really surprising at all that Kalaupapa is said to be one of the most haunted places in all of Hawaii. This island was basically a death sentence for those on it. Shackles, cages, caves. Sounds about right to be haunted by the afterlife. Number 3. The Vanishing Village. Way up north, a village named after a bountiful, massive freshwater lake in Canada's Nunavut. 1932. A Canadian fur trapper and explorer went to the village of Anjakuni Lake. The people's known there for their markets of elaborate fish and extensive wine. This village was a staple for most on the map. Joe LaBelle, a well-known fur trapper and well-known in the village, had an otherworldly sight when he arrived. He arrived and sensed something was a little wrong, a little too quiet, too foggy. He found that the village was completely emptied and deserted, even though there were lots of signs of life still present. Campfires blazing, pots still boiling, doors were even open, and food out waiting to be served. Thousands of Anjakuni villagers had simply vanished. He sent a telegraph to the closest RCMP office and told them about his account. And here's the scary part. They launched an official investigation which was never solved. They took a testimony from another trapper and his 2 sons who said they saw a large cylindrical object transform into a bullet shape before flying directly over Anjakuni Lake. At the village, the police found the kayaks were still on the beach, meals still in the early stages of rot, and apparently the headstones were even stacked neatly in piles on either side of the graves. Okay? To this day, there's no proper explanation for this mass disappearance of people and the hundreds of empty graves. Number 2. Skeleton Lake. Deep within the Himalayas of India lays the bay of an ancient lake, shrouded by an ancient mystery. Rupkund Lake, famously known as Skeleton Lake. It was rediscovered by the British Forest Rangers in 1942, and what they found was pretty jarring. Hundreds of ancient human skeletons found at the edge of the lake. Investigations led some to think that this was a catastrophe of some sort, or the remains of a legendary event where a group was suddenly killed in a violent storm around the 9th century. Nope! 3 different groups of people died here all at different times. It's not located on or near a trade route. No evidence of any ancient bacteria pathogen, ruling out diseases. Yeah, this one's really weird. One group of people had genetics to present-day South Asia, while the other group related to the people of Central Europe. And finally, a group particularly from the Greek island of Crete. But how? All here? They found the bones and deaths were genetically separated in time by as much as 1,000 years difference. Wooden artifacts, iron spearheads, even slippers and jewelry were found by the National Geographic team who studied 30 skeletons in 2003. Skin still on some of them. Ugh. 300 people have been found so far. Legend goes, Parvati, a supreme goddess, cursed the kingdom, unleashing drought and disaster upon them. She sent down a blizzard of hail and whirlwind which swept the people into the lake. Their skeletons are a warning to those who disrespect the goddess. I mean, maybe. The skeletons are visible in the clear water of the shallow lake during 1 month when the ice melts. That's terrifying. I'm gonna chicken out right now and just never visit this place. Just show up and get Jack Skellingtoned? Are you kidding me? No way, dude. And number 1, the City of Screams. Top of my relaxing trip list, Golgotha City, Afghanistan. Peaceful once as it was the capital of the Gorid people, until Genghis Khan and the Mongol Empire seized it in about the 12th century. Apparently legend goes its ruler, Jalaluddin Mangburnu, fought back and apparently killed Khan's grandson in battle. Yeah, probably not a good idea. In 1221, Khan sent his 15-year-old Mudu Khan here to claim and siege, who in turn was shot and killed with an arrow, precipitating the siege of Bamyan. At first, the city held strong, but was apparently sold out by the ruler's daughter, who, according to legend, betrayed the castle's secret entrance, sharing and consorting with the enemy. Expecting to be rewarded, her and her people were unfortunately slaughtered, and the ruins cursed, of course. The Russians, the Taliban, and the Americans have all used these ruins as fighting posts over the years, as this place hasn't been lived in since. But through them is apparently very haunted, the ruins subject to those who still hear the screams of the fallen. Yeah. Terrifying. Haunting sounds of screaming and warfare are echoed here, thus giving it its famous name of the City of Screams. Dark horseback figures to even full-on uniformed specters are seen atop the rubble. Yeah, I just say we just avoid this place completely and just kind of back away slowly out of respect, you know?